Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Kid Naruto accidentally awakens strongest Byakugan. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
A boy with dark brown hair looked at the blonde in front of him and said, "Hey, what you doing?" Prior to this, Naruto had been sitting comfortably and completely focused, but this boy had jerked him out of his reverie. Quickly, Naruto said, "I need to focus, so if it's okay with you, I'm focusing chakra." "Why are you doing that in the woods? You should get home, the woods are dangerous," the boy said, turning back to the blonde after glancing around for a while. The 9-year-old boy said, "I'll be fine, could you leave me alone now?" His focus was once again disrupted. Once more, Naruto lapsed into a meditative state, but his reverie was short-lived as the boy prodded him with a stick. Naruto exclaimed, "That's it," but as he stood up, he heard a stomping sound coming from the woods and was knocked down by an older girl. The girl kicked debris at her nephew and screamed, "Leave my little brother alone, you monster." Naruto had already left when the other boy attempted to stop his sister. She reprimanded the boy, saying, "Never talk to that thing, he is dangerous." Naruto had barely escaped that predicament. He was aware that it could have escalated into a full-scale fox hunt with him as the prey if other people had witnessed it. He had only survived the previous one because a single Anbu had put his own safety in danger to rescue Naruto from the crowd. The boy was positive he wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the Anbu. Unfortunately, Snake, Inu, Weasel, Iruka, the Hokage, Old Man Ichiraku, and his daughter Iyame were the only ones who showed Naruto any kindness. They could only do so much to stop those who wanted to harm him, but at least there were some people who cared, and those individuals were far more numerous than the others. "Hey, Naruto," a tan, dark-haired man stated cheerily, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. Reflexively jumping, Naruto was still a little shaken by what had happened earlier. "Are you okay?" "Why yes, Iruka-sensei," the boy blurted out, his dilated pupils looking straight into his teacher's eyes. "What happened?" Iruka squatted down to meet Naruto's gaze. "Nothing, sensei," Naruto attempted to pretend, understanding that it was ineffective. "All right, if you tell me what it is, I'll take you out for a few bowls of ramen." Iruka could tell the bribe was effective right away because Naruto's eyes seemed to glow brightly. He felt as though he had been taken advantage of. After 10 bowls of ramen and one heartbreaking tale, Naruto and Iruka were sitting quietly. With his gaze fixed on the ground, the boy questioned, "Why do people hate me, sensei?" "I wish I could tell you, Naruto," Iruka continued. "Let's just say that they can't let go of the past or their own sins." The boy said, "What's that mean, sensei?" He was clearly having a headache from trying to understand what the man in front of him was saying. "You'll understand one day, Naruto." "Okay, sensei, if you say so." As the boy started to finish his 11th bowl, Iruka gave him a smile. His ability to change emotions so fast was astounding. After paying the bill, Iruka went on, "Anyway, Naruto, I'd suggest you get home now. It's getting late, and you have school in the morning." When Naruto's eyes opened, he started choking on his food. "And for Pete's sake, slow down," the man finished, performing the Himalich maneuver to unhinge the ramen from the boy's throat. "Okay, sensei," the blonde said, panting, "but is it possible for you to walk me?" "Of course," the man replied, stroking the boy's hair, "since I can tell exactly what time you arrived home. You can't use that as an excuse if you're late tomorrow." Knowing that was not the true reason Iruka was walking him home, Naruto grinned and started to walk with his sensei. After all, nighttime is when a ninja does the best work. Once, Naruto's voice echoed off his living room's walls, "Byakugan," before the room went quiet once more. Naruto had been given a few books by the Hokage for his 9th birthday a few weeks earlier, and one of them, A History of the Clans and Bloodlines of Konohagakure, had caught his attention. He knew that some techniques were only learned by a select few, but this book introduced him to jutsus that only members of a particular lineage could learn. After reading through each section, Naruto tried to determine that clan's bloodline limit because he had no known family, and he reasoned that one of his parents might have come from a bloodline clan. The book's information on the reclusive Hyuga clan was limited to a picture of the Byakugan eye, instructions on how to activate it, and a brief history of the clan itself. Naruto had already tried the Mokuton bloodline, hoping he was the direct descendant of the first Hokage, but he was wrong. The next ones he had tried were a little different. The Akamichi body expansion, the Sharingan, and a few other minor ones. Though it contained the information Naruto needed, he felt compelled to call out the bloodline's name after making the necessary hand signs and focusing his chakra on his eyes. Just for safety, he wasn't overly shocked when nothing happened, and his gaze traveled down to the Hyuga man's pupilless eyes in the picture. Naruto's head exploded with force, and he began screaming as he hit the floor. Anything was better than this pain. Let him die, return him to the mob, torture him, just get rid of it. However, it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and Naruto's vision started to return to normal. No, it was better than normal, with everything around him being sharp and clear, with the right tone, and allowing him to see into the corners of his apartment and even behind him. Hold on, behind me? Naruto asked himself as he lifted his leg behind him, and below? How about up above? So this is what the Byakugan does? The blonde asked, raising his hand in the air. What else is it capable of? Iruka was going to lose it when he saw Naruto in the morning, but Naruto started thinking about it, but his improved vision unconsciously focused on his bedroom clock, and he knew it was time to go to bed. Naruto was going to be late, so he opened his eyes with a start and looked at his alarm clock before almost yelling. Naruto repeatedly yelled, "Gotta hurry," as he put on his clothes, "Can't be late." After locating his orange jacket in his bathroom, Naruto turned to face himself in the mirror and grinned 3 times when he saw that the eyes staring back at him were pupilless and blue. The prospect of showing Iruka-sensei excites me. The wind he broke through forced itself into his room and blew the book Naruto was reading to its last section, allowing only a portion of the word Nami to be read before the wind forced the book shut. "Oh!" the boy cried, running and jumping out his window. With a shout, "Nara, Shikimaru," Iruka said. A sluggish voice answered, "Here," Iruka said. "Pick your head up, Shikimaru," as the boy started to droop his head toward the desk. His response was a grunt. "Haruno, Sakura," added Iruka. At least there was someone who was glad to be there. "Here, sensei," the girl with the pink hair said cheerfully. "Hyuga, Hinata," yelled the man meekly. "Hi, here, sensei," was the reply. "Uzumaki, Naruto." There was silence in the room. "Naruto?" Lifting his head from the roll call sheet, Iruka yelled once more, "Has anyone seen Naruto?" Hinata started shifting uneasily in her seat. It was obvious that she liked the boy, so much so that Naruto himself was the only one who seemed to be unable to tell. However, there was always the issue of the clan, and Hinata feared that she might never be able to be with him because her father would never permit it. At this moment, Naruto, wearing an orange jumpsuit, rushed through the classroom door, his spiky blonde hair the only thing visible until he closed his eyes and turned to face Iruka, apologizing. Naruto said, "I'm so sorry I'm late, sensei," before continuing. "I'm sure," Iruka said firmly, "you must have a valid reason." "I was working on learning a jutsu last night and kinda lost track of time," Naruto said, nodding his head. "Oh, well, since you worked on it for so long, I'm sure you wouldn't mind coming to the front of the class and showing them what you learned," Iruka said, a little intrigued. As soon as Naruto lowered his head and started walking to the front of the class, Iruka felt sorry for him because he had never seen Naruto walk with his head down before and always had a smile on his face, even when someone had insulted him or thrown something at him. The class felt a sudden surge of chakra and the veins around Naruto's eyes bulged, making them clearly vivid. When the blonde opened his eyes, the entire class shuddered, except for a certain blue-haired Hyuga. Iruka wondered as Naruto raised his head to take his place at the front of the class, realizing that the boy didn't want anyone to see his eyes, which is why he was staring at the ground. "Goodbye, Naruto, you can use the Byakugan," Hinata almost screamed, leaving her seat to dash to the front of the classroom to catch a better glimpse of her crush. Iruka jerked in surprise. Not only had Hinata disregarded the classroom rules entirely, but she had also spoken loudly enough for everyone to hear her without stuttering. Iruka walked around Naruto to meet his eyes, and sure enough, he was looking into the Byakugan's pupilless eyes. "Naruto, Hinata, I need the two of you to come with me," Iruka said as she approached the door and turned to the class. Iruka led the two of them out of the classroom and into another class. "Another teacher will be here in a moment, so behave yourselves until he gets here," she said. "I want you two to wait here for a few minutes, Hinata and Naruto." "Okay, I'll be right back. I must call the Hokage and bring a substitute teacher to the classroom." Feeling that too much was happening for him, Naruto questioned, "Is this really that big of a deal?" "Yes, it is, and Naruto-kun," Hinata replied. "The Hyuga clan takes great pride in keeping the secrets of our bloodline." Iruka was about to respond when a meek voice interrupted him. Seeing that she was having some trouble speaking to the boy, Iruka concluded for her, "And the fact that you activated it alone brings even more questions. Anyway, I'll be back in a few minutes." There were a few moments of silence before Hinata's curiosity got the better of her and she couldn't help but ask questions. She attracted the boy's attention by saying, "So, and Naruto-kun," followed by, How did you activate the Byakugan? I was given some books by Oji-san, said Naruto. For my birthday one of them was a book on the clans of the village, so I decided to see if I had any of their blood in me. I don't know who my parents were. With regret, Hinata said, I see, so I went through every one of the bloodlines in the village until I came to the Hyuga bloodline. It had practically no real information on it at all, but it had enough for me to try to activate it, and when I did, well, this is the result. It hurt much worse the first time though. Yes, it did, concurred Hinata. Outside the classroom, the two heard an older voice ask, might I ask what this is about, Iruka? Something you'll want to see, Hokage-sama, he responded. Another man said, and might I ask why I'm here? Hinata went pale, knowing that voice from anywhere. The three men entered the classroom after Iruka opened the door to let the two kids in. Anticipating the worst, the elderly man said, all right, Iruka, what has Naruto done and what's it got to do with Hiyoshi's daughter? Actually, it isn't really Hyuga-san's daughter that this concerns. I just didn't feel it wise to leave Naruto in a room alone for too long and felt Hinata was the best choice to keep him out of trouble. So what is the purpose of calling us here? Asked the Hokage, nodding his head in agreement. Iruka called to Naruto, and the boy opened his eyes. Don't tell me he's, was said before he activated the Byakugan. Few things in Hyuga Hiyoshi's life have truly shocked him, and even fewer have been expressed by him. However, Hiyoshi's mouth dropped as he stared at the boy who everyone referred to as a monster. A Hyuga was Naruto. Hiyoshi tried to calm himself and said, I guess it's in his blood. Naruto was sulky when he said, that wasn't very funny, Hyuga-san. Hiyoshi initially attempted to ignore the remark, but the expression on Naruto's face had already defeated Iruka and the Hokage before he knew it. He was also laughing hysterically at the remark, and the confused expression on his daughter's face next to the blonde only made it funnier. The adults had settled down after a few minutes and were now debating what to do next. He'll have to be moved into the Hyuga household, Hiyoshi said bluntly. I'm afraid we can't have unmarked Hyuga blood running around the town freely. It's the way of our clan. I understand you reasoning, Hiyoshi, replied the Hokage, but I can't have him branded if he is. We both know what will happen. Yes, we do, Hiyoshi said, then I'll have to make him a main house member. With obvious interest, the Hokage inquired, how do you plan on doing that? I'll adopt him. The elders won't like it, but I am still the head of our clan, and so long as I am, they'll hold no power against me. You're certain about this, Hiyoshi? The leader of the Hyuga clan gestured for the Hokage to follow him out of the room and into the hallway. Hiyoshi started talking as the older man shut the door behind him. We both know whose son Naruto is, Hiyoshi said, and I've never been a big fan of leaving him out in the world on his own. Even some of my own clan hold what he carries against him, but if he's my child under my protection, no one will be able to touch him. The Hokage gave a nod of approval, but the honest truth is I want him around, Hiyoshi said. You saw what happened in there. I haven't laughed like that since I don't know when, and he seems to be able to help my daughter as well. I think having him around will be a very good thing for the Hyuga clan. If you think this is what's best, then by all means, replied the Hokage, but rest assured that if anything happens to Naruto while he's there, if anyone tries to brand him or eliminate him, I will see to their punishment personally. Even though the boy was under Hiyoshi's protection, there was always a chance that a rogue shinobi would try to harm him, so the statement made him uneasy on the inside. Hiyoshi's only thought was to place guards on the boy while he slept. Otherwise, he would be left alone. Iruka! Exclaimed the Hokage. He and the two kids filed out after a moment when the man opened the door. I would like you to continue your class. Take Naruto and Hinata with you. The two of you will come to the Hyuga compound after class, Hiyoshi said. I'll be sending house guards to escort you. You are to wait here until they arrive. The reply was, Hi, Hyuga-sama. From Hinata the answer was, Hi, from Naruto. After giving a nod, Hiyoshi and the Hokage started down the hallway. The Hokage yelled, Behave yourself, Naruto, at the blonde. Naruto grimaced. The elderly man appeared to be able to see into his mind. Even though Naruto was typically viewed with contempt, he could see the curiosity on the faces of the kids in front of him. When he walked into the room, they had assumed they understood the boy, but now they realized he was a total enigma. One thing was certain, though. Naruto could sense the hatred emanating from a boy named Sasuke, who was Uchiha. The remainder of the class was fairly uneventful. Iruka's lecture on the fundamentals of a more complex form of chakra control was the only interesting part. Before they knew it, the class was over, and the kids filed out into the courtyard, gradually vanishing with their parents until there were just 3 left. Now that he was positive the 3 were alone, Sasuke screamed at Naruto, his fists clenched into balls. Who do you think you are? I've been trying to activate my Sharingan for years, and yet here you are. activating something you're not even supposed to have. Get over it, Naruto responded bluntly. I don't care about your Sharingan, and my activating this has nothing to do with you, leave me alone. The boy yelled, no, I won't stand for this, and twirled 6 shuriken at the blonde. Hinata was never going to forget what transpired next. Naruto had inadvertently mastered the Juken chakra technique, forcing chakra into his hands and arms and catching all 6 of the throwing weapons in barely perceptible movements. Naruto turned away from the furious Uchiha and deactivated his Byakugan as he dropped the weapons to the ground. I said, leave me alone. The boy said, fine, with a tone that was clearly malicious. I don't need weapons to deal with you. Before either of them could speak, Sasuke released the fire-infused chakra in a single, enormous explosion. Naruto and Hinata could both feel the surge of chakra building in his lungs, giant fireball. Only the charred ground where the two had been standing was visible after the smoke had cleared. The boy said, serves you right, loser, to himself. A man behind Sasuke said, your aggressive behavior could be interpreted as a direct threat to the Hyuga clan. When the boy turned around, he saw Hinata and Naruto in the arms of a Hyuga guard from the main house. After giving the man a sneer, Sasuke turned around and left. The guard sat the 2 kids down and said, your instructor and the Hokage will be informed. Don't think you'll get away with this without some form of punishment. The guard turned to Hinata and Naruto as the boy disappeared, saying, Hinata-sama, Naruto-san, please come with me. I've been ordered to escort you to the clan grounds. Hinata said, thank you, Yami-san, and bowed. Yes, thank you, Naruto replied. I don't know what I could have done against that Jutsu of his. From what I saw, you handled yourself pretty well, the man replied as they started to walk. You managed to stop every one of his shuriken by focusing chakra into your arms. I think our style of fighting will be perfect for you. With a tone just above average, one of the clan elders exclaimed, I cannot allow this. We cannot allow that monster into our household. I agree with Elder Iroku, an elderly lady replied. There's no telling what he may do once he's here. Why not simply brand him and let him live outside the house? Hiashi's harsh tone made the woman silent. I, for one, will not allow this, he said. And the Hokage agrees. If he is branded, it is likely someone from our main house will execute him. Another elder questioned, do you not trust our family? The clan head clarified, I am just not unaware. It isn't a lack of trust that makes me say this. One of the elders asked, Hyuga-sama, may I speak freely? You may. I don't know what you feel towards this boy, but I feel I am speaking for this entire council when I say that we want nothing to do with him. The boy brings chaos wherever he goes, and I feel he may bring an end to our order if you take him in. I see your point, concluded Hiashi. Another man said, but, if I may be so bold, Hyuga-sama. Feel free, Hisashi. I feel as though the chaos this boy brings may make our ties stronger. I've always felt as though the clan has needed something more. We are practically machines. I feel this boy may bring to this clan what it is missing. Spoken like a true leader, Hiashi said, I've decided to take Naruto in as one of my own. He will be a Hyuga. With a collective, hi, Hyuga-sama, the elders answered. When Hinata and Naruto arrived, Hiashi, Hisashi, Negi, and Hanabi were all standing outside. Hisashi knelt down to introduce himself to Naruto, following a few cordial greetings, and Yami telling the main and branch heads about the Uchiha incident. My name is Hisashi, the Hyuga man introduced himself to Naruto. I am the head of the branch clan, Hinata's uncle, and Hiashi's brother here. Confused, Naruto questioned, branch? You'll come to understand our ways soon, child, Hisashi responded, but until then, I'd like to welcome you, on behalf of all the branch house, to the Hyuga clan. Naruto returned the courtesy when Hisashi bowed to him. The younger Hyuga answered, my name is Neji. I am the heir to the branch house, Hinata's cousin, and Hyuga-sama's nephew. Before turning to face Hiashi, Naruto bowed to the boy who was a little taller. She remained hidden behind his leg as he introduced himself. This is my youngest daughter, Hanabi, he said, and she is a little shy of new people. I'm sure she'll get used to you. Naruto bowed to her, and she gave a small nod in return. Before we return to your apartment for your belongings, you will be introduced to a few others, and in case you were unaware, I am Hyuga Hiashi, the head of the Hyuga clan. Hiashi went on, and you will be learning a lot about the Hyuga clan in the coming years, and there will be certain things expected of you as such. You will be taken out of the academy at the end of this school year and homeschooled until your last year, when you will return to complete your more hands-on coursework and pass your final test to join the Hyuga clan as a shinobi. Do you have any questions? Naruto shook his head. This was definitely not what he had anticipated from joining a clan. Good, You will be attending your homeschooling with Hinata here, Hiyashi stated, motioning to his daughter, as she will be removed from the academy classes until the final year as well. Naruto gave a stupid nod after saying, "Very well, let's begin the tour." Hiyashi gestured Naruto inside. As he was led through the building's halls, the only thought that truly occurred to Naruto was, what did I just get myself into? Indeed, he wasn't expecting much from joining a clan. He didn't think they'd even allow him to join a clan given how everyone seemed to hate him, but this was the complete opposite of what he'd expected. He was being introduced into the prestigious Hyuga clan, and the entire process just seemed to be confusing him. Naruto, who had been with the Hyuga for almost 4 months, shifted uneasily in his room, and aside from his light blue eyes and blonde hair, he could have easily been one of them. Naruto-kun, how are things going? Hisashi asked, taking the boy by surprise. The blonde stumbled, I'm well, Hisashi-sama, in reply. The branch head patted Naruto on the shoulder and said, Now, I can see you're uncomfortable, but the clothes you're wearing are necessary for a number of reasons. Naruto looked at the man in mild disbelief and then nodded. He felt as though he were wearing a dress, and he could not understand why he was obliged to wear the outfit. Hisashi-sama, why must I wear this? Naruto ventured to inquire. The Juken, the man said gravely, requires a lot of precise movements. It's almost like a dance in many ways. You must wear the clothing that gives you the freedom to move your arms and legs until you have mastered the fundamental Juken stances and their flow. You can experiment with more constricting attire once you've mastered the fundamentals. Although he had an awkward family and people he could talk to, Naruto was already missing his old life and bowed his head in defeat because there were so many confusing rules to follow. The Hyuga male remarked, You'll get used to it, Naruto-kun, with a sincere smile. The blonde boy said, If you say so, Hisashi-sama, in a somber tone. Besides, you've got Neji and Hinata here to help you through it. That one didn't get a response from Naruto. While Hinata was one thing, Neji, in Naruto's view, was far too serious and took his studies to a new level. For what purpose was that look? With a smirk on his face, Hisashi inquired. Naruto said, You've never had to study with Neji-san, with a weary expression on his face. The boy was far too young to have that expression on his face, so Hisashi had to laugh at it. You'll get used to him. Who knows, you two may begin to grow on each other. Hisashi couldn't help but laugh at the expression on Naruto's face. The blonde undoubtedly brought something that the Hyuga family had been lacking. With the exception of a few bad habits the boy brought with him, the first few months of Naruto's training were fairly uneventful. Despite living in a home full of Byakugan users, Naruto continued to cause trouble at one point. Much to Hisashi's joy and disdain, he had managed to sneak red dye and pour it into the clan head's laundry when Hisashi had to speak with his brother and discovered him dressed entirely in pink. He broke down in tears of laughter following a lengthy lecture from Hiyashi and the installation of a permanent guard around Hiyashi's quarters. Naruto vowed that it would never happen again. Following that incident, Naruto stopped playing practical jokes and focused on his studies, quickly catching up to his friends. By the 4th month of his induction into the household, Naruto had finished learning the fundamental stances and was now expected to observe them in action. He and Hinata had to go to the daily sparring sessions between the older students, where their main objective was to memorize the stances they had learned months earlier and observe how they flowed with one another based on movements. Naruto had learned more advanced chakra control early in their training, and although it was necessary for the gentle fist, the two were instructed to keep their strikes purely physical, and before he knew it, he and Hinata had been going to these sparring sessions for months and were now taking part in them as well. A few months in, Naruto showed a side of himself that no one had noticed during a sparring session. Hyuga Hiyashi found himself entering the training grounds as Naruto faced the older boy. An elderly Hyuga exclaimed, Hiyashi-sama, it is an honor, what is the purpose of our visit? Hiyashi responded, I'm just here to see how the newest member of the main house is doing. Is there any chance we could have an honest matchup? Lord, do you mean with full Juken strikes? Yes, I want to see how far the boy has progressed. Put him in opposition to Hikari. Very well, my lord. Following a brief break, Naruto faced a new opponent who was more familiar with the gentle fist. You are to use any and all of your abilities in this match, said the trainer. Hiyashi-sama wishes to see how far you've come. Naruto turned to face his adoptive father before bowing to his opponent after he and Hikari had bowed to the instructor. Naruto said, I hope I do you proud, Hiyashi-sama, and bowed deeply. Naruto turned to give his opponent the same treatment after Hiyashi returned the bow. The boy said, I will win this match, while looking directly into Naruto's eyes. Instead of answering, Naruto switched on his Byakugan and assumed his fighting stance. Start. The teacher gave the order. Naruto closed his eyes and slowed his breathing as Hikari charged forward. Only one boy noticed, and now Hiyashi was intrigued. The other boy threw the first blow, but Naruto delivered the next 3. Leaning into the blow before hurling his hand upward and knocking his opponent's arm out of the way, then hitting the boy in the chest, knocking him a few feet away, and finally hitting the boy with a simple brush of his other arm. Hiyashi was clearly pleased that Naruto had defeated his opponent without the other boy even realizing it. Naruto could see the tenketsu. The other boy leapt to his feet and charged in once more, but Naruto met him head on this time. Following a few brief exchanges, Hiyashi saw that Naruto's opponent was growing weary and realized why. After using his Byakugan, Naruto was making every hit matter. Hiyashi was both pleased and dumbfounded by the way the final exchange was performed. It appeared that the boy had altered the gentle fist by adding his own variations of stances and maneuvers, but what pleased Hiyashi the most was the final blow Naruto delivered, which should have been in Naruto's blind spot. Naruto front flipped over his opponent and struck one of the tenketsu on his neck, rendering him unconscious. First to his opponent's fallen form, then to his teacher, and last to Hiyashi, Naruto bowed. As he returned the bow, Hiyashi said, "I am very pleased at your development so far, Naruto. You have made me proud." Even though he was only a beginner, Naruto was displaying a lot of promise. It seemed as though the Juken was meant for him. After all, Naruto blushed a little and bowed again as Hiyashi left the training grounds. After the end of his first year as a Hyuga, Naruto's life turned in a direction he was definitely not happy with. His sparring sessions had been reduced to only 4 times a week, with every other day being filled with studies. It was like being in school for 24 hours a day. He had to learn the history of the Hyuga clan and its association with Konohagakure, as well as the policies of the Hyuga household. Every Monday was filled with different facts about the clan and its origins. Tuesdays, Naruto learned about the other major clans in Konohagakure, as well as a few minor ones. This lasted the majority of the day, and, just a few hours before turning in for the night, he had his first sparring session of the week. Wednesdays, he learned the history of Konohagakure and the politics surrounding it and its allies. Thursdays, he learned of the other major ninja villages before his second sparring session of the week. Fridays, he learned of the lesser ninja villages and of their associations with the larger villages. Saturdays, he learned the history of ninjutsu and its association with the samurai clans before his third sparring session of the week. And on Sundays, he learned the history of their world, including the great ninja wars that had gone on throughout time, while the day ended off with his personal sparring session with Hiyashi, Hinata, Neji, and Hizashi. On a personal level, Naruto remained largely unchanged. Hiyashi soon started teaching him to suppress his emotions, and eventually Naruto realized that Hiyashi wanted him to maintain his identity as long as he maintained his Hyuga persona in public or in front of the elders. Something about changing the Hyuga. In any event, Naruto quickly adjusted to his new surroundings and started to try to blend in, though his blonde hair and blue eyes did present him with a bit of a dilemma in that regard. Hinata, the only person in the Hyuga household who didn't harbor some sort of unidentified animosity toward Naruto, was his first friend. Neji swiftly followed, indiscriminately making sure to correct the branch members when they glared at the boy. Given that Hiyashi was the head of the clan, he continued his studies under both Hiyashi and Hizashi, but he advanced to learning other languages and other things, and before he knew it, another year had gone by, at which point his practical studies took center stage. Before their afternoon sparring matches, he, Neji, and a few other boys would run an obstacle course set up behind the compound in the early mornings. After a 10-minute cool down, their workouts became more difficult, including target practice, fighting while partially disabled, and fighting groups of enemies once more, though Naruto and the group found themselves quickly settling into the routine. There was a commotion in the Hyuga household about 6 months after their training. Apparently the shinobi ruler from the Land of Clouds had tried to kidnap Hanabi, but the man had been stopped when Hizashi arrived to check on the strangely silent young girl and discovered her unconscious and drugged in the arms of the unidentified shinobi. The main branch guards had not noticed the man enter, so Hizashi immediately went on the attack and knocked him out cold. Konoha was now holding the shinobi ruler from the Land of Clouds captive. Naruto asked the older man, "Hizashi-sama, what's happening? Is everyone doing okay?" "Everything is fine, Naruto-kun," Hizashi said, grinning broadly. "I stopped someone from kidnapping Hanabi." Before bowing and retiring to his quarters for the night, Naruto smiled back at the man. This sort of thing couldn't have been easy for either of them, and it wasn't long after that he became a shoulder to lean on for both girls, with Neji entering the academy. A few weeks after the attempted kidnapping, Naruto was told that the man was tried for treason to Cloud and sentenced to death, but it didn't stop several of the clan members from mumbling about death because he was caught, To be honest, Naruto didn't care what happened to the man. His main concern was the welfare of both Hanabi and Hinata. Hiyashi led the two to the compound gates and said, "Now, Naruto, Hinata, I expect the two of you to uphold the Hyuga name and image outside. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, Hiyashi-sama," they both said simultaneously, bowing. Both Naruto and Hinata were wearing the same expression right now, stern and solid, but on the inside, they were jumping up and down, and for good reason. They had been locked up in the clan compound for more than 3 years to the day, and now that their studies were over, they were finally being released. They were happy for different reasons, though. Naruto was happy to be able to run around town once more, and Hinata was happy to be with Naruto away from the Byakugan, the ultimate prying eyes. Hiyashi grinned as the two walked out of the main doorway. Whether his daughter realized it or not, he could see past her eyes, and the smile that adorned her lips as they turned and walked away was not missed. Naruto muttered, "So the academy starts back up tomorrow," following a pause. "Hi, Naruto-kun," added Hinata, though only Hinata could hear him. The blonde complained, "It doesn't really seem fair. We recently completed our studies in the clan, and now we're confined to school once more. I kind of needed a vacation." "Naruto-kun, you know the reason it's set up like this," she replied. "Yeah, I guess." The two entered the room in silence once more. Town's market district. Well, I get to prove myself to Iruka-sensei, if nothing else. No matter how depressed he was, Hinata could always find a way to make himself and everyone around him smile. Before they realized it, Naruto had unconsciously guided them to Ichiraku's ramen stand. Following a brief exchange of words, they sat down to eat. "Hi, old man," Naruto shouted. Tucci turned to the voice and retorted sharply, "Who are you calling old you? Is that you, Naruto?" "Old man, you got it." The boy answered. Tucci had good reason to not recognize his favorite customer. Naruto had grown a foot taller over the years, thanks to the food at the Hyuga household, and his blonde hair was long instead of shaggy, with the back hanging loosely almost halfway down his back. His appearance was not the only change, though, as he now wore a loose black t-shirt and slightly baggy tan cargo pants. The boy Naruto who had visited the Hyugas was gone, replaced by the much taller and leaner teenage version, or so Ayame had claimed. "So, Naruto, what have you been up to over the last few years?" As he brought their bowls to them, the elderly man inquired. With a mouthful of ramen, Naruto responded, "Training," forgetting his Hyuga etiquette. As she examined Naruto, Ayame said, "Ah, so it's true then, you've been." Absorbed by the Hyuga. After Naruto finished his last spoonful, he turned to face Ayame, who gasped and flushed. Whether she wanted to admit it or not, the boy was very attractive, and his pupil-less, cerulean blue eyes didn't help at all. They revealed his true depth, his gentle and kind nature. After a brief period of silence, Hinata's fidgeting was what finally roused Ayame from her reverie. The woman knew that Hinata had a crush on the boy and could only assume that her actions were her way of telling people that she had already made a commitment to him. After giving her a brief smile, Ayame arrived to collect their bowls. "Naruto, are you prepared for your next?" While preparing a steaming pot of noodles, Tucci called back. "I'm afraid, old man, but I have to leave again because I have a lot of things I want to see before the day ends. I'm going to make the most of my first day out in 3 years." Naruto jumped off the stool and grabbed Hinata's wrist in response. It would be an understatement to say that Tucci was taken aback, as he had been preparing ramen for the boy for almost a decade, and Naruto had never left without at least 5 bowls. "Well, you're welcome to visit us again at a later time. It's not a crush anymore, Dad," Ayame said to her father as they left the scene after the man called behind them. "Yes, I also see it. She's totally smitten with him," Tucci said with a smile, "and they'd make a nice couple." After a few hours of exploring and stopping at various stores, the two of them found themselves reluctantly returning to the Hyuga estate. However, a few minutes later, Hinata saw Naruto was leaving again and called out to him. "Naruto-kun, where are you going?" she inquired. Naruto ran the back of his head and grinned widely in response. "I was going to go back and get it earlier, but I kinda forgot," he said sheepishly. "I remembered something I wanted to pick up outside." "Want me to accompany you?" she inquired. "No, I'm fine." As he headed for the gates, he said, "I'll be back in about 30 minutes. I remember where it is." Even if he had said yes, Hinata knew that 30 minutes was too long for her to be out. She had her own responsibilities as an heir to attend to first. As a result, she reluctantly forced herself to look away from her crushes and retreated to her father's quarters. It was a lovely autumn morning, and the two felt everything that only a Hyuga could. The ground's touch, the soft wind, the chirping of birds, etc. But most of all, they were at ease with one another, which was how things should be, and they both relished it. After a few minutes of conversation, the academy appeared, and Hiyashi ordered them to stop and adopt the icy Hyuga manner. Although Hinata had been doing this for a while, Naruto didn't like it, but he wasn't looking forward to defying the clan head's wishes, and he also wanted to enjoy seeing all of his classmates' old faces and not being recognized by any of them. He was looking forward to hearing his name called at roll call. They were the first to arrive in the classroom, even beating Haruka-sensei, and they sat next to each other in the back, waiting patiently for the other students to arrive. Hinata with her hands on her knees and Naruto with his hands clasped together in front of his eyes, leaning on his arms. The boy sitting next to Hinata didn't look like the Naruto everyone had known, but Naruto didn't go unnoticed as the room gradually filled with people, many of whom were talking among themselves. The problem was that nobody recognized Naruto. No way, Shikamaru said softly to himself. Naruto couldn't significantly alter anything. Furthermore, by now he would be announcing that he was back in front of the class. Shikamaru, who is the man seated next to Hinata? He's as gorgeous as Sasuke? Inquired Ino, a young girl wearing a purple outfit and long blonde hair, with genuine curiosity. How am I supposed to know? I bet he's Hinata's bodyguard or something, Shikamaru retorted angrily. Ino appeared dissatisfied with his response. With a slight smirk, the boy with the black hair said, or maybe, he's her boyfriend. Ino was so predictable. One cute guy gets mixed in, and she's all over him. That Shikamaru could see the jealousy written all over her face. Naruto looked like a Hyuga, so Ino hurried over to his desk and leaned to look under his arms. So, said Ino, bending to look into his face, what's your name? Definitely a Hyuga, she thought to herself as Naruto opened his eyes and glared at her, making her stand up nervously. She felt his eyes following her all the way back to her seat as Ino apologized. Sorry to bother you. It was pretty obvious that Ino's response from the boy was a glare. That's just how Hyuga men were supposed to act toward all those who weren't in their clan. Shikamaru laughed to himself when she took her seat. He'd assumed the guy was a Hyuga, but he was now absolutely certain of it. Why else would Ino react like that? He looked over to see the two Hyugas talk for a moment before reverting to their reserved manners. You know, Shikamaru said out loud, I'm hoping that might not be her boyfriend. Their relationship would be incredibly dull. Students, take note. Haruka called out over the commotion without Shikamaru's noticing. The entire class had arrived and, as predicted, most of the girls were eyeing the new guy. I will now begin roll call when your name is called. Answer, Haruka concluded. Until he got to the H section, the roll call proceeded as planned with no problems. Haruno, Sakura. Here, sensei, the kunoichi with the pink hair said. Hyuga, Hinata. With the words that had been etched in her mind since the day she was able to speak, the blue-haired Hyuga got up from her chair and bowed to Haruka. Hi, sensei. When Haruka realized he recognized the next name, he started to call it out, but he had to look around the classroom because many of the students were also perplexed. Thinking he was going to call out the name of the mystery Hyuga next, Haruka didn't say anything, but instead he just stared at the boy, examining him from head to toe, and his eyes widened when he saw that the roll call sheet was error-free. Haruka stopped and stared at the blonde mystery. Hyuga, she said, and then, in a whisper, Naruto. They couldn't believe they were thinking those thoughts about Naruto, and most of the girls were now blushing wildly as the crowd of students gasped. However, Naruto remained unfazed and stuck to his Hyuga training, standing and bowing to his sensei while saying something similar to Hinata's, Hi, Haruka-sensei. He then took his seat and moved his hands in front of his face once more, and for several minutes, only 4 students in the classroom were silent. Naruto, Hinata, Shikamaru, and Sasuke. In reality, Shikamaru had suspected it from the beginning, but Sasuke knew for sure the moment he laid eyes on him. When the two looked at one another, their masks briefly dropped and they grinned. It had been a few years since Naruto had awakened his Kekkei Genkei, and both of them were above such pointless fights as the one Sasuke had started back then, but the truth was in their blood, the unlikely Hyuga and the last Uchiha. Yes, there was undoubtedly a rematch in store for them. They had an unspoken agreement. Ignoring the students' cries for mercy, the class eventually abandoned its bookwork portion and switched to something a little more useful, practicing taijutsu. As he paired off names on his clipboard, Haruka said, All right, class, I'm going to be assessing your taijutsu today. I will pair you with a classmate for this test because it is required to see how you compare to the other students in your class and make necessary improvements. I'll be the judge for this one-on-one competition. Each match will only last 5 minutes or until one is unable to defend themselves, and no weapons, shuriken or otherwise, will be used. Haruka glanced at his students to make sure they were paying attention. All right, I'll call out the first two names. The first few fights were fairly entertaining. After one of the students ducked an axe kick, his opponent's shoe caught his belt and pulled his pants down with it. It took Iruka several minutes to bring his class back under control. Even Naruto briefly removed his mask, which didn't help that the boy was wearing boxers with smiley faces. But after the initial battles, Naruto heard his name called and went to the temporary arena that Iruka had prepared. Iruka looked at his clipboard and said, "Inuzuka, Kiba, please step forward." After approaching his location across from Naruto, the boy assumed his fighting stance. "Regretfully, I will have to request that Akamaru refrain from participating in this one," Iruka said, glancing at the puppy on Kiba's head. "He counts as a weapon." "All right." Kiba put the puppy on the ground and said, "Go wait by sensei," adding, "Akamaru, I can handle this one on my own." The dog approached Iruka and then sat down to observe his master. "Go ahead and start. I've always wanted to put a Hyuga in their place," the dog user commented, lunging at the blonde once more as Kiba sprinted forward and swiped at Naruto, barely missing him. Iruka's eyes widened at his own error as he thought, "Hyuga, oh no, Kiba, Naruto, back down." Naruto's movements and the loud, thwack sound that lasted for almost 3 seconds told him that the Inuzuka would not be rising anytime soon, but it was too late. After a moment of hesitation, the blonde knelt down and began pressing the dog user's tenketsu, effectively opening them back up. Neither he nor Iruka expected Kiba to react as he did. And Naruto fell onto his back from the force of his opponent's punch. He hurried over to his fallen student, and Naruto followed suit. "Get down, Kiba." Iruka reprimanded his student. "You've already lost," but his words were ignored. The boy was undoubtedly worthy of the Inuzuka title, as the dog user was now swinging wildly, losing all sense of style and replacing it with feral rage. Naruto, on the other hand, maintained his composure while dodging, weaving, and moving at odd angles. He also wore a smile on his face, which seemed to get bigger as the dog user's attacks became more and more animalistic and feral. Rather than pumping chakra into his hand to kill his opponent, Naruto turned his palm into a fist and slammed it into the Inuzuka's sternum, forcing the air out of his lungs and sending him sprawling in one blow. The final blow was what Iruka knew as a Hyuga finishing technique. As Kiba started to gather his thoughts, Iruka walked back over to the boy and helped him to his feet, reprimanding him the entire time. "Winner, Naruto," Iruka said, guiding the blonde back to the crowd. "Is it clear that when I end the match, it's over?" Naruto turned to face the final Uchiha and said, "As for your taijutsu style, I'm only slightly acquainted with the Inuzuka clan's style." But the two exchanged a brief look before Iruka called the next set of names. Sasuke was one of the few students left in the crowd after a while. Next up, Sasuke and Naruto, Uchiha, who had an obsidian eye, finished for Iruka. "Let me fight Naruto." Iruka said, "I'm afraid not, Sasuke, because Naruto had already defeated his opponent another time. I'll pair you two up." Sasuke responded. He didn't even end the match with a Juken strike. He wasn't trying. He barely tried against Kiba. He said, "I'd like to battle him." "I'm sorry, Sasuke, but there are no exceptions." "Fine," Iruka went on. "Shoji, please come forward." The match was barely that. Sasuke had kicked the Akamichi in the back of the head with such pain that he was rendered unconscious in a series of quick movements. "I wanted Naruto," the boy thought to himself. Sasuke, that was incredible. The pink-haired girl, Sakura, tried something like that, and the blonde-haired girl, Ino, practically squealed. The two were competing for the Uchiha's attention and were immediately ignored. Right now, Naruto was grinning at the front of the crowd as he watched the other students start their matches. He had no idea that a young, blue-haired Hyuga was standing a few feet behind him, wishing she had the same bravery that Sakura and Ino had shown Sasuke. Hiyashi said, "I heard about your defeat of the Inuzuka boy in class today," as Naruto sat down at the dinner table, his expression ranging from shocked to sheepish. "From what I hear, he got in a serious hit," Hiyashi said, "something about knocking you onto your back." "Hi, Hiyashi-sama," said Naruto, "he attacked me as I was unsealing his tenketsu." Hiyashi sipped his tea, seemingly anticipating Naruto's next move. "I was in the midst of an attack when I heard Iruka-sensei order the match to end. My opponent was totally disabled by the time I finished, but he launched an attack as soon as I opened his tenketsu. I used a physical version of one of our style's finishing moves to end the match so he wouldn't attack me again," Naruto explained. "Yes, I heard about that one," Hiyashi said, "and from what I hear, it completely broke through his defense." "Hi, Hyuga-sama." Hanabi and Hinata had joined the two at the table by this point, and although Hinata had been present and could have inferred what the two were discussing, Hanabi was utterly perplexed. What was it that I just missed? Still a little perplexed, the younger girl inquired. Something about a finishing move turned physical. Hiyashi told his youngest, it was just small talk, but Naruto was telling me about his spar today. The thought of the spar made Hinata smile as well. It had been a while since she had seen Naruto so joyful. Hiyashi went on, jolting the young woman out of her reverie. Remember, Hinata, adding, we have sparring practice in 2 hours. Hinata nearly swallowed. She was aware that the spar today would not be a pleasant sight. This is a joke, what? Hiyashi made the day's sparring session much more intense than the others, and he was deeply disappointed in his daughter's incapacity to handle it. They had only been fighting for a few minutes, and Hinata already looked like she was shot. Hiyashi declared angrily as Hinata struggled to get to her feet. This is so pitiful. He scolded his firstborn, saying, Hanabi is superior to this. You are an embarrassment to this clan, to yourself, and more. Even though Hiyashi knew that the next few words he would utter would be cold, he chose to keep the next comment to himself because he didn't want to subject his daughter to that kind of suffering. Hinata was trying desperately to stand and had finally managed to do so. Hiyashi turned around and started to leave after saying, Give up, Hinata, I'm done. You've disappointed me, go back to your room and continue your studies. I'm a failure, was the only thing that came to mind as Hinata sagged after her father left the room, barely able to move, but still shedding tears. Why would Naruto ever want me? When Naruto heard her sobbing while passing the dojo, he was compelled to open the door out of curiosity and was devastated to see Hinata sobbing into her own arms while curled up in a ball on the floor. Her instinct was to run, to escape whoever had seen her there, but she hadn't even gotten to her feet when Naruto pulled her down into his arms and held her there. She hadn't even noticed him enter when she felt his hand on her shoulder. With her eyes still squeezed shut, Hinata cried into his chest, L let me go, P please. J just L let me G go. No, said Naruto quietly. Her tears ended right away. She muttered, N Naruto, her embarrassment taking the place of her sadness, I need T to G go. No, the boy said again, keeping her firmly in place. P please N Naruto. I will, but first listen to what I have to say. In response, the young girl gave a nod. Hinata, the boy started, I'm not smart, but I'm not stupid, tell me what happened, please? Something major happened to bring back your stutter, who vanished a year and a half ago, please tell me about Hinata-chan. He started to relax his grip on her, but rather than escaping his embrace, Hinata put her arms around him and pushed her embarrassment aside. In our training, Father is typically very strict and hard on me, but today he was much worse. I believe I did something to enrage him. Naruto interrupted, observing that her smaller body was covered in bruises from the chakra being forced through her skin. Nothing could have been bad enough to deserve what he did to you, he said. My father was upset, but I'm not sure what I did. He utterly overwhelmed me, and after leaving me speechless, he referred to me as a disgrace. Naruto's admiration for Hiyashi faltered. He couldn't comprehend why, under any circumstances, he would harm Hinata in that way. After a brief pause, Naruto said, I don't care what your father thinks, adding, in my eyes, you will never be a disgrace. Hinata was fortunate to have put her arms around her crush because she had little doubt that he would have been unaware of her feelings for him. Her heart felt like it was flying and her face was burning. All of a sudden, her father's opinions seemed unimportant. When Hisashi overheard the conversation between Hinata and Naruto, he was both pleased and disappointed at the same time. He was pleased at the development of Hinata and Naruto's relationship, and he was disappointed in his brother for his brutal methods and lack of understanding. Even if they don't end up together, Hisashi thought to himself, those two will be best friends for life. Someone had to put the man in his place after the conversation's obvious climax, and the branch house head headed to his brother's quarters. Naruto had been drawn to his usual place of thought for hours after the incident, but this time he was not alone, as Hinata sat next to him on the rooftop just above his room, admiring the magnificent night sky. Hinata caught his attention and whispered, Naruto-kun, thank you for earlier. Don't worry about it, Hinata-chan, replied the brunette, I just find it difficult seeing you without a smile on your face. Naruto couldn't help but be totally unaware of the situation, while Hinata couldn't help but blush. Naruto went on, you're my best friend, Hinata-chan, and it's really hard to see you sad. Hinata answered, you're also my best friend, and I understand, Naruto-kun. Before turning back to the night sky, he gave her a brief smile, his eyes expressing how much he valued her, saying that. With the exception of the ongoing curiosity about Naruto and his unexpected return, the following few weeks passed rather uneventfully. However, no one ever inquired about his whereabouts. His Hyuga-like answer sufficed even though a small percentage of people actually found the courage to approach Naruto. He typically just glared at them. He fulfilled his duties as a Hyuga. As the school year progressed, Naruto and Hiyashi both became less adamant about the two maintaining their Hyuga appearance. He became more outspoken in class and even struck up conversations with a few of his peers. A few girls were trying to ask him out before he realized it, but he was so unaware of it that their persistent hinting only confused him. The Naruto and Sasuke fan clubs were ultimately the two main fan clubs among the schoolgirls. The academy's tests became increasingly difficult over the course of the months, and Naruto eventually had to enlist Hinata's study help, though it occasionally gave Naruto a headache. The two spent their little free time immersed in the books, either that or endure more of Hiyashi-sama's punishment for Naruto. The continual headache was far better. When the school year finally ended, it was time for the final examinations. Alright, the final exams consist of 3 basic courses, Iruka said, calmly speaking with the students: taijutsu, ninjutsu, and throwing and accuracy. In a few moments, I will lead you to your first destination, but before we begin, I need to go over the details of the courses. Now, everyone was watching Iruka closely, listening to everything he said. The same is true for taijutsu and ninjutsu. The more accurate you are, the more points you will receive. If you fall short of a certain overall score, you will fail. If you fail 2 or more of the courses, you will fail. Throwing and accuracy will require you to hit the target at least 8 times out of 10. The better your accuracy, the higher your point total. You will compete against one of the senseis here in the taijutsu section of these courses. You're supposed to exert every effort to subdue us. A few of the pupils looked at him anxiously. Don't be concerned about us retaliating. Our only focus will be defense. We are primarily interested in your performance, not whether you beat us or not. Iruka looked at the faces in the room and said, and last but not least will be the ninjutsu portion, which will be revealed to each of you individually as you enter the chambers to take the exam. He knew that many of the faces would pass, but 1 or 2 were dubious at best. Now if you will please follow me, he said. As his students joined him, Iruka turned and walked to the door. Grinning at them, he was sure they would pass because many of them had a determined expression on their faces. As Iruka walked up to him, a man wearing a headband over his eyes said, "So these are the genin hopefuls, huh? Look like a bunch of nervous wrecks if you ask me." Iruka said, "They are, following the man, but you can't really blame them." True enough. The man approached Iruka's class and gave them a stop signal. "My name is Hogoku, Jinta," said the guy, "and I will be the judge of your throwing and accuracy exam." The man's coal-black eyes were visible through his headband. "When I call your name, you will take your place up at the throwing line and choose 10 projectiles. All of them are top quality, I can assure you, and are razor sharp, so try not to lose any fingers." As their names were called, the class gradually shrank, with the exception of a few. The coal-eyed sensei yelled, "Haruno, Sakura, please take your place at the throwing line." The girl with the pink hair approached the line with trepidation and gazed down at her target. The man went on, "You get 1 practice throw," and extended his plate of projectiles to her. Sakura's anxious expression vanished with a single, quick motion and a soft thunk. She had struck the mark. She finally took all 10 of the weapons in her hands and started throwing them with a determined expression up until she threw her final weapon. There was a constant thunk. When it struck the wood, it bounced off instead. Jinta said, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to count that as a miss, young lady," as he positioned himself next to her. "If you can't throw it hard enough to stick it in the target, it can't be counted as a hit." Sakura returned to the class, but she was not deterred by her last miss because, after all, she hit 9 out of 10. The man went on, "Hyuga, Hinata, if you would kindly take your place." A lot depended on Hinata passing her exams, and she generally appeared to be about to faint. She felt a hand on her shoulder as she started to walk to the line, and when she turned around, she saw Naruto grinning. He said, "You can do this, Hinata-chan," with complete faith in the girl with the blue hair. Hinata only needed that. She went on to the line and, following a brief practice throw, landed 1 shuriken after another in the target's red and yellow regions. Iruka was grinning by the time Hinata was done speaking. He observed Naruto encouraging her. In addition to the fact that she had embraced the exercise, he was pleased to see how far she had come. It seemed that the blonde Hyuga was, after all, positively influencing her. Jinta said, "Hyuga, Naruto," as he looked at the blonde. Naruto started walking to the line right away. Naruto remarked, "I don't really want to practice throw, sensei," while holding the 10 kunai. "Very well, you may begin whenever you're ready." The kunai started to make contact with the target 1 by 1, and by the time it was all over, the proctor was grinning. "Actually, sensei, can I have that practice throw after all?" Naruto immediately threw the second kunai the man gave him at the target, hitting it squarely in the middle and finishing the kunai smiley face he had created. Naruto returned to the class and said, "Thanks, sensei," to which Iruka could only shake his head. It was better than some of his previous pranks, at least. Until they got to Uchiha Sasuke, who was able to throw all 10 of his weapons simultaneously and land them all in the bullseye. The remainder of the exam was pretty uneventful. When the test was finally over, Iruka started escorting them to their next stop. "This is where you'll be taking your taijutsu exam," a tan kunoichi with black hair said as the class moved in front of her. "You will be paired off with one of the senseis here at the academy and you will attempt to overcome them. They will not be fighting back, so you don't have to worry about getting seriously injured, but don't expect them to just take a beating either. You will be judged on how well you perform by the sensei you're paired off with. Any questions?" There was silence in the classroom. The woman grabbed a box from the side of the room and said, "All right, we'll be pairing you off 5 at a time, so there will only be 5 matches going on at once. You will each draw a piece of paper from this box, and then proceed to the designated mat." Each student drew their own lot and went to the designated mat as the woman moved through the ranks of students, until she and Iruka were left standing. She looked at Sasuke and Naruto's backs and said, "So those two are in this class, huh?" Alongside her, Iruka said, "Yeah," adding, "And I have to say I've never seen a more promising class in my career." She raised her hand and gestured to Naruto and Sasuke, saying, "Those two are in a league of their own." The woman grinned at Iruka and said, "You have the heirs of several clans in this year's class. It wouldn't surprise me if this is the best class ever to graduate from this school, but those two." Looking at his roster, the man said, "Inuzuka, Kiba, please step forward." He told the students in front of him, "You have 5 minutes to try to overwhelm me," adding, "If you are unable to land a single hit, you fail this portion of the exam. You will be fighting me one-on-one, so will The match started right away, but Naruto's focus was diverted from the battle in front of him when he heard the students cheering from the next mat over. He also noticed that Sasuke was panting and the teacher in front of him was coughing violently while on one knee. To get that kind of reaction, Sasuke must have delivered a crucial blow, likely a gut shot. As Hinata tried to hit him, he could see another teacher swerving and dodging a few mats down. The seriousness on her face and the teacher's terrified expression made him smile. Behind his smirk, Naruto thought, "Looks like someone forgot about the Juken." Before he knew it, Naruto was positioned in front of his teacher as his name was called. "Begin whenever you're ready. I'll start the clock as soon as you attack." Naruto assumed his position, and it seemed as though his teacher's expression changed from one of perplexity to one of realization as he assumed his position as well. Byakugan. After charging at his opponent, Naruto's initial attack was totally blocked. The blonde whirled around and hooked his left leg behind his teacher's and pulled, knocking him to the ground as the instructor pushed his arm aside. 1. Naruto said as his teacher stood back up, but as he struggled to stand again, he experienced numbness in his left leg. Holding his leg, the teacher said, "This isn't going to end well." 2. Naruto said, continuing his count while striking his opponent's right forearm with a glance. As he started dodging Naruto's blows, the man reflected, "I never expected him to put up this much of a fight. I've never fought an academy student this well versed in taijutsu." 3. Naruto said, tracing the teacher's side with his fingers. The teacher was already quite frustrated because he was experiencing problems with his lungs in addition to his left leg and right arm. Hinata had just finished her match when she noticed Naruto's and looked at it. Naruto moved too quickly for her to notice. In less time than it took to cover 10 feet, he delivered a powerful blow to the teacher's stomach. Hinata muttered to herself, "But it's the same as that time." After all the time they had known one another, she could hardly recall Naruto's initial arrival in the Hyuga household, let alone the period preceding it. However, she did recall his brief altercation with the Uchiha. In contrast, the proctor felt as though he was attempting to move through water. His legs felt like jelly, his arms felt heavy, and he was having difficulty breathing. The blonde, taking a peculiar position and turning to face his teacher, said icily, "You are within the realm of my divination. Should I call the match since I can't stop his next attack? No, pride won't let me." The instructor thought to himself as Naruto started to charge. Then there's only one other choice. Naruto felt the air leave his lungs just as he was about to launch his attack. The instructor had attacked him when he heard the sensei exhale in relief. He started to back up while still holding his stomach and attempting to stay upright. "I shouldn't have let my guard down like that," Naruto thought to himself as he struggled to catch his breath. "Hiyashi-sama will definitely use this against me." Naruto's bearing returned to him, and a smirk appeared on his face. "What are you smiling at?" the instructor inquired, his expression icy. As he started to approach the teacher, Naruto said, You landed a blow on me that was foolish on my part. Hiyashi-sama's gonna have a field day with this one. As Naruto's smile grew into a full-fledged smirk, the instructor started to get a little concerned. I forgot that the best defense any ninja has ever come up with has been filled with offensive maneuvers as well. I forgot to look beneath the shadows. The teacher was gradually retreating by this point, and Naruto's grin had become a little crazy. I haven't had this much fun in a long time. Shall we continue, sensei? Naruto ran after the instructor as he slowly nodded. The teacher now realized that Naruto had been attempting to maintain a modicum of professionalism. That is, he was holding back, if he had previously felt disadvantaged. 6. Naruto said softly as the man felt chakra rise from his side and enter his body. He heard the blonde whisper again a few seconds later. This time, it sounded like 12. His body stopped reacting normally, and he began to worry. It was then that he realized he was afraid he would strain to hear what this Hyuga was saying because he was deliberately counting quietly, and every time he heard a number, he wondered where he had been hit. As his body grew less responsive, he gradually started to worry about his safety as Naruto persisted in his assault. The instructor heard something that totally dispelled his fears. The timer the boy was playing on both his knowledge and his fears. As Naruto approached and started to open his tenketsu, the man said, "Very good, Hyuga. You're very talented in the area of taijutsu, probably more so than someone your age should be," he said. Naruto said, "Thank you, sensei," and went back to work before calling the next student to the mat. The man took a moment to stretch his sore muscles. Iruka replied to the black-haired Kunoichi, "It seems you're right, Miharu," carrying on their earlier discussion. Those two really are in a league of their own. Iruka called out to the students who were waiting, "Okay, when I call your name, file into the classroom to complete the ninjutsu portion of this exam." As students were called to finish the exam's final test, the classroom gradually started to empty. A silver-haired man called out, "Hyuga, Hinata." As he opened the examination room door, the young heiress made an effort to appear as unassuming as possible as she descended the stairs, but on the inside, she was overcome with butterflies. It was a turning point. After a short while, the silver-haired man opened the door once more. "Hyuga, Naruto," he said, and the blonde got up and started walking down to the room. "All right, Naruto," Iruka said as she looked at the papers in front of his face. "You are required to use Kourimi, Henge, and Bunshin no Jutsu in order to pass this part of the exam. For Henge, I need you to transform into Mizuki-sensei over there, and for Bunshin, I need you to make at least 3 acceptable clones." The last jutsu was something he knew he didn't quite understand, but something Hiyashi had said months earlier rang in his head. Naruto, for the most part, tried to appear unfazed as he replaced himself with a chair on the other side of the room and then transformed into the silver-haired man guarding the door. "It has to do with too much chakra." "Sensei," Naruto stated as he prepared for the technique, "you said at least 3 clones, right?" Iruka nodded the affirmative. "Is there a maximum?" "Well, no, I guess not. Why do you ask?" Iruka said, observing a playful twinkle in Naruto's eyes that he was all too familiar with. "Might I step outside for this part of the exam, sensei? It's a little small in here?" Despite her obvious paleness, Iruka nodded once more before starting the "just you." Naruto leapt out the room's window and landed safely outside. Iruka hadn't anticipated that many, though, because there was no upper limit and the minimum was 3. Iruka stopped counting when he reached 30 and said, "Very good, Naruto, you pass." Naruto grabbed his Hite 8 as he entered the room through the opposite door and was thrown into an embrace right away. Hinata practically squeaked, "You did it, Naruto-kun," her voice. "And you did too, I see," Naruto continued after giving her a hug of his own. Hinata held Naruto closer and closed her eyes, saying, "I'm so happy. We're both genin now." Half of the girls in the room were watching in jealousy, but Hinata didn't notice or care. He was hers at the moment. The other girls had no chance. Hiyashi grinned and said, "Know that I'm very proud of the 2 of you," adding, "I'm confident both of you will make fine shinobi." "Thank you, Hiyashi-sama," the 2 said simultaneously, turning their heads to bow. "Remember, the pride of the Hyuga clan rests on your shoulders." "So," Neji said, jumping out of the way of a blow to the chest, "you finally graduated." Naruto managed to get past Neji's defenses by blocking the counterattack, saying, "It was actually disappointing, the graduation exam." Without missing a beat, Naruto swiftly sealed off one of the tenketsu in Neji's offending forearm after Neji swiftly countered Naruto's counter and sealed a tenketsu in his abdomen. Neji responded, "Touché," clenching his left hand into a fist. Attempting to use Juken with an arm incapable of exerting chakra is pointless. "But what gets me," Naruto went on, trying to block and parry a barrage of kicks and punches, is that it was too easy. No one in our class failed. I don't think that was the real test. Naruto hooked his left leg behind Neji's right as he was falling, forcing the Hyuga prodigy to follow him after Neji swiped the blonde's feet out from under him. Neji remarked, "You let your guard down," as he stood up straight. "You did too," smirked the blonde in response. Anyway, Neji went on, straying back to their earlier topic. "I can't exactly tell you what to expect from here. You might be put through another test, you might not." With a defeated sigh, the blonde said, "I kind of figured you'd say something like that. I guess I'll find out soon enough, huh? Only time will tell. You'd better prepare for dinner. Hiyashi-sama will punish both of us if we show up looking like this," Neji said with a smile to his blonde companion. Naruto had trouble sleeping that night and ended up sitting in a familiar spot on the rooftop of the manor after a fit of tossing and turning. Hinata's gentle voice broke the stillness. "I knew I'd find you here. I take it you couldn't sleep either?" Naruto said, "You know me too well," with a smile on his face. He looked up at the night sky and thought about counting the stars for a moment. As soon as he started going on missions, nights like this were likely to become rare. A part of him was anxious because he was at last one step closer to realizing his dream. But this anxiety was accompanied by threefold excitement. Who could predict what lay ahead for him? He was prepared to face it head on, whatever it was. After a few minutes of silence, Naruto started, "So, does it look good?" After pondering Naruto's query for a while, Hinata turned to face him. She grinned right away when he mentioned his Hite 8, which was fastened around his forehead at the moment. "Hi, it does," said the heiress. It was also true that it fit him really well. Hinata liked the wilder appearance his bangs gave him without the headband, even though it gave him a slightly more sophisticated appearance. "Hey, Hinata-chan." "Yes, Naruto-kun?" The two exchanged a fleeting glance. "We did it." "Yeah." After almost an hour of conversation, Hinata suppressed a yawn. Naruto asked rhetorically, "Sleepy?" Hinata was quick to reply, "And no," before another yawn attacked her. The girl was blushing, and Naruto smiled at her. He knew she was just trying to use this as an excuse to sit with him on the roof, but he could tell she was going to faint. "You should really head to bed, Hinata-chan." "I'm not tired at all. Promise." Hinata leaned her head on Naruto's shoulder and whispered. "Not tired, huh?" Naruto's face showed a look of blatant incredulity. Her snores were now drowning out any response he could think of, so it didn't matter what he or she thought. Naruto laughed to himself, observing how soft her snores were, and said, "Wow, she even snores politely. I guess I'd better." When Naruto spotted an odd figure on a nearby rooftop a few hundred yards away, he stopped. The blonde said softly, "You're not Anbu," as he turned on his Byakugan. The man's wide eyes and lip movements were not lost on Naruto, who could see the man's face in agonizing detail. The phrase that came out of the intruder's mouth was very colorful, and Naruto chose to keep it. Before Naruto realized it, the man had left the village and proceeded a considerable distance from him. There was only one thing on Naruto's mind. This wake-up call was not going to sit well with Hiyashi. As he turned the corner to the Hyuga leader's room, Naruto practically screamed, "Hiyashi-sama." When the blonde saw a group of branch shinobi outside Hiyashi's quarters, he was stopped after hearing some remarks, many of which were directed at the man he had seen. He changed his mind about trying to break through their ranks. His assumption that the guards wouldn't have seen the intruder was a stupid one. "Silence," Hiyashi demanded. The room became quiet immediately. "I understand there was an intruder, and I understand that he was heavily equipped. I even understand that he retreated too fast to have been any lower than Junin status. What I don't understand is why not a single person here saw his face." Many of the guards wore the same stoic expression they had worn since Naruto arrived, while others flashed looks of failure. "No one here saw the intruder's face?" Hiyashi asked again, his voice tainted by annoyance. "I did." After turning around, the group saw Naruto standing behind them. Most of the guards were unconcerned, aside from being so busy that they hadn't noticed him. With a smile spreading across his features, Hiyashi questioned, "You saw the man's face, Naruto?" The blonde gave Hiyashi a quick nod, and Hiyashi instructed the guards to keep their Byakugan active and return to their stations. As he led the blonde to his study, Hiyashi said, "Naruto, what are you even doing awake at this hour?" "I couldn't sleep, Hiyashi-sama," replied the kid, "so I was stargazing on the roof with Hinata-chan when I noticed him." Hiyashi gave the boy a raised eyebrow. "She kinda fell asleep on me," Naruto said with a laugh, rubbing the back of his head with his right hand. "So I was about to take her to her room and well." "I see," replied the older Hyuga. "I hate to do this to you, seeing as tomorrow is your first official day as a genin, but I'm going to need you to describe the man to the Hokage." "Hi, Hiyashi-sama. After the scribbles of the artist next to him stopped, the Hokage gazed at the hanged Naruto for a few moments. The Hokage took a big drag from his pipe and explained, "And you're certain that this is what the man looked like?" He laughed at the idea. "Hi, Hokage-sama, I was about to head inside when I noticed him on a rooftop several hundred yards away," the Hokage said. "But he quickly noticed me. I'm not sure if he felt the chakra I'd used to activate my Byakugan or not, but after spotting my gaze, he muttered the phrase." The mouths of the Hokage and clan head dropped at the words that came out of the blonde's mouth, and turned around and fled to the western gates. The two leaders were staring at Naruto, and he tried not to laugh, but instead he pointed it out to them. "Are you okay, Hiyashi-sama? Hokage-sama?" Quickly, the two jolted out of their daze. The Sandaime responded, "Yes, I'm fine. I would advise never using that phrase again." "Hi, Hokage-sama," Naruto said robotically, fully aware that the Hokage had not given him any instructions not to, and intending to exploit that fact. Hiyashi scolded the boy, saying, "Naruto, I'm going to have to ask that you not repeat anything you saw or discussed tonight to anyone." "Hi, Hiyashi-sama. Now, I would suggest you follow the house guards to the compound. You've got a busy day ahead of you tomorrow." "Are you not coming with us, Hiyashi-sama?" "No, the Hokage and I have a bit more to discuss. Have a good night, Naruto. I will have Hinata come and get you should you sleep in." Naruto turned and left the chambers after bowing at the waist. Hiyashi turned to continue his conversation with the Hokage after a short while, when he noticed Naruto and the branch guards making their way back to the compound. The younger man started, "Do we have any records of him in our bingo book? The man he described?" "I have no idea why he wouldn't be in our books," the Hokage said, putting down his pipe and approaching the head of the clan. "Someone who was able to not only slip past our barriers and get past our guards but managed to avoid the sight of more than one Byakugan and detect the use of another would have to be a high Junin status ninja." Looking at the Hokage monument, Hiyashi asked, "What if he wasn't a ninja at all? He might have received ninja arts training without ever enrolling in the program." "Not likely. We are one of the few villages that will allow our ninja trainees to quit and become civilians. Most other villages would sooner execute their ninjas than allow someone with training to walk around freely." "I see," Hiyashi started, but was cut off when Naruto stormed through the doors, much to the secretaries' and guards' chagrin. The Hokage noticed the frantic expression on the blonde's face and said, "What is it, Naruto?" Totally losing his manners, Naruto retorted, "Sorry, old man. I forgot to mention something about the man." "Didn't realize I was that tired," the blonde remarked to himself as Naruto collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, and then rose again. Hiyashi said, "What is it, Naruto?" "When he was running away I noticed something strange about his chakra," the brunette continued, taking a deep breath. "It was an odd color, and seemed to be flowing through his arms and legs in a sort of erratic pattern." To gain a better understanding of the man's identity, the Hokage inquired, "What color was it, Naruto?" "Almost white, but I could still see a tinge of blue." The Hokage's eye grew wide, then shrank back to its normal size. "It wasn't a suggestion, thank you, Naruto," Hiyashi said, escorting the boy out of the room. "Now you should head to bed." "Hi, Hiyashi-sama." Once more, before continuing their conversation, the two waited for the blonde to disappear. That explains how he got through the barrier, the Hokage thought. If he were to stand beside it and create a clone, it could create it on the other side of the barrier if the proper amount of chakra is put into it. Hiyashi, who was not familiar with that particular chakra pattern, questioned, "But then why was the man's chakra so erratic?" "It was a lightning clone," the Hokage went on to say, "and seeing as the clone had an almost white chakra, though still slightly saturated with blue, it narrows down our search significantly." "Why is that?" "Only one clan in the elemental nations is known to have that specific chakra color, Anbu." 3 Anbu emerged from the Hokage's fortifications and faced their commander. "Get me as much information as you can on the Konda clan from Kumogakure. I need to know if they've had any members disappear on missions lately or if any went rogue. You have your orders." The Anbu left the room quickly. "Let's hope nothing comes of this." As he lay on his bed, unconscious like a light, Hinata whispered into his ear, "Naruto. Naruto-kun, it's time to wake up." As he rolled over, the blonde muttered, "Don Wana." Hinata exclaimed, "En Naruto-kun." This was turning out to be more difficult than she had anticipated at the moment. She was kneeling on the bed, supported by her elbows. "Naruto-kun. We have to go to the academy soon. Father asked me to wake you so you could have breakfast," she said, extending her arm to his shoulder and giving him a small shake. After mumbling for a while, Naruto pushed his right arm against her in an attempt to stop her trembling. She turned a deep red as his hand touched her. For his part, Naruto was dreaming happily about himself and an unlimited ramen buffet at Ichiraku's. Until, for whatever reason, he stuck his right arm in it. Naruto thought to himself, squishy, and questioned why he was handling it rather than eating it. Eep. Naruto's eyes opened immediately. Saying aloud, "Ramen doesn't eep." He turned his head to his right arm. He saw Hinata in the shape of a brilliant shade of red on the other end of his right hand, and then he realized where his hand was. Naruto instantly blushed as much as Hinata and tried to stutter an apology, but instead uttered a nonsensical remark that was incomprehensible banter. In her limitless wisdom, Hanabi seized the chance to interrupt them and find out why they were taking so long. However, what she discovered left her with more questions than she could ever hope to ask. Hinata and Naruto were seated on the floor facing one another. The former was bright red, shifting uneasily and poking her fingers together, while the latter was a deep shade of red, and he was playing with his thumbs while his eyes were shifting uneasily from side to side. Hanabi said, Father says to hurry up, the food's getting cold," in utter bewilderment. Even with the stutter, the two chanted, "H-high." Hanabi's perplexity increased. Before she had time to consider it further, she said, "I'll see you down there," if only to protect herself. As he continued to look at his hands, Naruto essentially whispered, "I'm sorry about that, H. Hinata-chan." The younger girl, who for once strutted less than Naruto, answered, "It's okay. Naruto-kun. Anyway, let's go before father decides to come get us himself." The idea of Hinata's father finding out about the two made Naruto's face go a little pale. Naruto knew without a doubt that Hiyashi would want to know what had happened, and this knowledge drove him to dress more quickly than ever before and pull a blushing Hinata along with him. As the two walked to the academy, Naruto thought aloud, "I'm surprised Hiyashi-sama didn't ask why we were so late to breakfast." The memory caused Hinata to flush brightly. "I'm thankful he didn't ask," she said. The blonde said, "I'm really sorry about that, Hinata-chan," for the 20th time that morning. With a sly smile that alarmed the blonde, she said, "It's okay, Naruto-kun," adding, "I'll just have to repay the favor someday." Naruto went pale a little because he was so terrified by the heiress's recent display of his wilder side. He was aware that some of his pranks could be construed as partially suicidal if the intended result was not achieved. For example, the first time he had sneaked into the Uchiha compound and set paint bombs to detonate when the clan compound door was opened. The "leave no trace" idea was a gift that Naruto was fortunate to possess. Naruto's expression, which was a peculiar blend of pride, anxiety, and sheer horror, made Hinata laugh. This would be fun for her. Naruto said, "I'm glad at least one of us is enjoying this," in a bland tone. Naruto. Hinata. The two turned to see who was calling, and Nara Shikamaru was there to greet them. Although Shikamaru was generally lazy, he, like everyone else, had a few unique motivators. Naruto's antics during their childhood led to him becoming close friends with both Naruto and Hinata. Soon after they became friends, Naruto stopped referring to the genius by his full name, and Shikamaru stopped addressing him by his full name as well, citing the fact that it was too bothersome. "How's it going, Shika?" "Pretty good." Choji's parents needed to talk to him for a while. "Mind if I walk with you guys?" "Of course," said Hinata. Naruto looked at him and he saw that she was pale. He ventured to inquire, "What happened between the two of you?" With his eyes fixed on Hinata's and both of them blushing a little, Naruto told his friend, "There was an incident this morning when she woke me up, and she's promised to repay me for it." As the blonde continued to go pale, Hinata smiled at her, and Shikamaru started laughing. "I'd keep my guard up, Naruto," said Shika. "She'll probably strike when you least expect it." "I know that," Naruto responded, "and that's the problem. We live together. How am I supposed to sleep at night?" Very restlessly, as he looked ahead, Naruto whimpered a little and said, "This is not going to end well for me at all." Iruka walked into the room and said, "Okay class, calm down, it's time to divide you into teams." The students appeared to settle down a little before giving him their undivided attention. As Genin, you will be operating in 3-man cells under the command of a Junin. There are several reasons for this, but all you need to know is it's for instructional purposes, said the man. After a select number of missions completed successfully, your instructor may give the application for Chunin. Once you have become Chunin, you will remain in your 3-man cells as a base, but more often than not, you will be included in missions where you may lead as many as 12 Chunin and Genin alike. After you've made it to Junin, you will either be included in joint operation missions, working alone, or taking over a Genin team, as well as being applicable for every position that a Chunin would. He quickly discovered that he had the class's undivided attention. You may have finally achieved your goal of becoming a ninja, but you are still on the bottom of the charts only through time, experience, and backbreaking training will you reach the heights of Junin and Anbu. Iruka smiled at the pupils. But before you can do any of that, you must first meet your teammates and instructor now. When I call the names for each team, please take a seat next to your new teammates. Flashback. With his head spinning, Iruka questioned, Hokage-sama, are you sure this is such a good idea? Yes, I'm certain, replied the Sandame. Your ideas for teams were excellent, but unfortunately, a new bit of evidence had sprung forth and forced me to change your designs for teams. You may handle them as you see fit, but the cells are set. But, sir, this throws off the teams to an incredible extent. No, Iruka, you need to look at each of your students individually and stop looking at their families. My formations are not flawed, and you students will prove themselves. Have faith in them. Hi, Hokage-sama. Flashback end. Teams 1 through 6, Iruka said, concluding his call-out of Team 6. You are to head to the training grounds, where Mizuki-sensei will be waiting for you and your Junin instructors will meet you. Iruka led the 9 remaining pupils to the front rows after they had filed out of the classroom. A blonde girl in purple, Ino, asked, Is something wrong, sensei? Observing the concern on his face, she replied, no and yes. Yes and no? What do you mean? Sasuke asked, staring into Iruka's onyx eyes. Well, the Hokage himself asked me to tell you this information, so Kiba, a brown-haired boy with red face paint said, raising his head. Shikamaru, the boy said, trying not to nod off, and everyone else, I need your undivided attention. They looked into their sensei's eyes as the room abruptly fell silent and the shuffling stopped. The scarred man started. A Kumogakure operative infiltrated Konoha last night. They must realize how serious this is, Iruka said, anticipating an outburst but soon realizing it wasn't coming. This time, everyone gasped. The Hokage is currently unaware of the intentions of this operative, he said, turning to face Naruto before turning to face Hinata. But we have our guesses. This infiltration is one step shy of forcing Konoha on a warpath. However, being that we don't have conclusive evidence for this, our village is currently on high alert. Though we aren't expecting another attempt for several months, this information and hypothesis has demanded a reorganization of scheduled teams. Originally we had planned to turn U9 into a combat team, a tracker team, and an assault team, but the Hokage has deemed it necessary to have other precautions taken. We don't know what Kumo was after, but we think they want our bloodlines. Hinata put her hand on Naruto's arm and squeezed, recalling the attack on her younger sister a few years earlier, but Naruto didn't flinch because he had already assumed this. Therefore, I have been given the order to place you in teams the Hokage has chosen. A lot of the group now had anxious looks on their faces. The Hokage didn't rearrange the teams very often. Team 7 will consist of Inuzuka Kiba, Uchiha Sasuke, and Yamanaka Ino, was announced. The 3 took their seats next to one another without arguing or applauding, just shuffles of feet. More foot shuffling. Team 8 will include Nara Shikamaru, Hyuga Naruto, and Hyuga Hinata. Team 10 will have Aburame Shino, Akamichi Choji, and Haruno Sakura. A girl with pink hair said, I apologize, sensei, but isn't it a little strange to have 2 Hyugas on the same team? In the front of the classroom, a silver-haired man said, it won't really matter who's on whose team actually, as 2 other people joined him, because you'll all be training together. The assignment of the teams is currently a formality. After giving Iruka a nod, the man paced in front of the students. A man with black hair and a cigarette in his mouth whispered to the woman next to him, I saw their graduation exams and these 9 graduated at the top of their class. Ability-wise I understand why the old man chose these ones. The silver-haired man quickly responded, but we haven't seen them in action yet, glancing at each student with one visible eye before moving on to the next. This is a hit or miss affair, kids. You either do great, or you die, he said, and many of the students swallowed the lumps in their throats. You've been inducted into the High No Cage apprenticeship. For the next 3 months, your lives are going to be a living hell, I promise. We will push you until you can know more, and then we'll push some more. You will learn all the ways of the shinobi, not just your fantasies, so if you're going to quit, don't waste my time, quit now. There was silence in the room. You have 3 days. In 3 days you will be taken from your family and forced to live together in a base camp. You will have no outside contact, no letters, no friends coming to visit, nothing. You will learn to live and operate as a unit and as pieces of a whole. By the time we are done training you, you will be worthy of the title High No Cage. 3 days had been allotted to the group to have fun and bid their loved ones farewell. When the students told their parents about the program, most of them were shocked. Very few of them accepted it, despite the fact that they themselves had never heard of it. Naruto was at Ichiraku's, one of his favorite spots, at this precise moment. The blonde asked, Hey, old man. Guess what? Into the back after making sure no one else was there. With a big pot of ramen, a middle-aged man approached the front and said, "Hey Naruto, what's got you excited today? Ever heard of the High No Cage program?" "Actually, yes," the man replied, surprising the brunette. It was a program devised by an old friend of mine. The Shadow of Fire program was to be used to train an elite guard that would be used as the Hokage's personal guard or, in times of war, commanding officers that could effectively turn the tides of war. Tucci seemed to know more than Naruto did, and he was listening intently to everything he said. The program would train several students, usually the prodigies of their generation, in the true way of the ninja, forcing them to understand the importance of everything a ninja uses: terrain, time, information, tools, taijutsu, ninjutsu, genjutsu, and finally physics and the laws of nature. The entire purpose of the program is to prepare young minds to be ready to fight and eliminate, at any time, any place, and under any conditions. The older gentleman placed the pot down and dumped a portion of it into the bowl that the blondes had approximately 20 bowls. Only for him when he returned, the program was unfortunately put on hold before it began. The fourth Hokage had everything set up and ready to go, until the nine-tailed fox showed up. It single-handedly eliminated over 3/4 of our ninja population, and wounded many more. Since then the program has been nothing more than a sheet of paper waiting to be put in effect. Tucci sat Naruto's bowl in front of him, but he didn't start eating right away, so he started piecing it together. The older man put his pot aside and said, "So they've finally started it back up, huh kid?" With his eyes fixed on his ramen, the boy answered, "Yeah, it has a total of 9 applicants, I'm one of them." "Congratulations kid." "Huh? You have to be the best of your generation to get accepted into the High No Cage. You done good kid. Tell you what, this bowl's on me." "You really mean it?" "Yup," the elderly man said, snatching up his pot and turning to carry it back to the rear. "You rock, old man." The Hyuga elders sat on the edges of a bamboo-lined walkway, and the only sound in the room was the flickering of candles. Following a few moments of silence, 2 figures appeared at the room's entrance and then slowly started walking toward the altar at the end of the path. The 2 knelt as they arrived at their destination, then lowered themselves to the Seiza position and placed 2 candles that looked alike in front of them. The more feminine of the 2 wore a pink kimono with a dogwood in bloom, its branches reaching across the entire outfit. The more masculine wore a white kimono with a sakura tree in full bloom, its petals gliding across the fabric in an invisible wind. A little older man was standing in front of them, lighting his candle on fire as the 2 bowed their heads. Hiyashi said, "Blessed be this ceremony," in a firm, loud voice. Every individual in the room could clearly hear the man's voice, even though there was no echo, as though every word were being ingrained in their brains. "Hi, Hyuga-sama," all the voices said. However, neither of the 2 people seated at the altar spoke or moved. "We of the Hyuga clan have been given a great honor. 2 of our own have been indicted into the High No Cage, the Shadow of Fire. Not only have they been chosen among the first to ever enter the program, they have brought honor to our clan as they are the only 2 from the same clan," Hiyashi said. "As such, these 2 have completed one of life's major trials, and have finally become full-fledged shinobi. When your name is spoken, raise your head." He went on, "Hyuga Hinata." The little girl raised her head and met her father's eyes. She smiled for a moment, then closed her eyes. Hiyashi concluded, "Hyuga Naruto." Many members of the council looked down on this name, but tradition was more important to the Hyuga clan than pride. The boy closed his eyes and raised his eyes to his surrogate fathers. "Rise, children, and accept the title of Hyuga clan shinobi." The 2 of them stood up and walked back toward the door. Hiyashi led them back to the doorway slowly, their eyes closed, each council member bowing their head as they went by. Hiyashi signaled for them to turn around once more as they came to the end of the path. "Open your eyes, my children." The council turned to face them and bowed as one after the 2 obeyed orders. "From now on, your challenges will only become more difficult," Hiyashi said. "As your journey through life lengthens, you will learn much and you will experience much. Remember that it is yours. This life is yours and no one else has one that is like it, nor will they ever. You will continue to grow into greatness." The 2 knelt down and said, "Thank you, Hyuga-sama," in unison. "Tonight, you will both bear the mark of the Hyuga clan." Hours later, Naruto and Hinata were seen grinning and laughing as they strolled down the corridor. Fortunately, the Hyuga coming-of-age ceremony they had undergone involved very little. Naruto, who had been sleeping very little the previous few nights, saw this as a blessing. The ceremony ended with the 2 being escorted through a strange hallway of the house and into a room where each of them had a tattoo of the Hyuga symbol on their right shoulder. With the exception of some discomfort and itching, the 2 were happier than they had ever been at the moment. The other students started to arrive, each sporting a sleeveless shirt that flaunted the tattoo on their right shoulder. after Naruto and Hinata had been waiting for a few minutes at the designated meeting location. After approaching Hinata, Ino said, "I wonder if it's a mark of the High No Cage? I didn't realize every clan was doing that," she said. As he joined the two, Kiba said, "Maybe," his savage grin revealing his excitement. "I know Anbu gets a tattoo on their left shoulder marking them as such." All 9 of the students had assembled by this point and were excitedly discussing what lay ahead that is, until he arrived. "My name is Hitaki Kakashi, but you will refer to me as Taicho," the man with silver hair said to the party. "There will be no sensei from you. I am not here to just teach you. I am here to drill you into the ground. I have been appointed to the commander of the High No Cage unit because I am the best from my generation and am one of the top shinobi in this village now. If any of you are having second thoughts, leave, because you won't be able to once we start." He shifted uneasily and exchanged a few anxious looks before grinning and saying, "Good, follow me." After 3 hours and a jog through the forest, the group discovered the ocean in a small boat. They stopped, and Kakashi chose to give a brief explanation. "You 9 are to take the boat to that island out there," he said, gesturing to the island, which was hidden from view. "It is heavily fortified, but you won't have to worry about sneaking in. The boat in front of you has 8 oars and a single rudder. 8 of you will be paddling, and 1 of you will be steering." Sakura said, "Which of us is steering, Taicho?" "That is entirely up to you guys." Kakashi then dashed to the water and hurried across to the island. Kiba practically swore, did he just run on top of water? He would need to learn how to do that. "Yeah, anyway, who wants to steer?" The group's blonde member said a few seconds later. 2 of the pupils held up their hands. The blonde said, "Okay. Well, Choji, Sasuke, Shino, Kiba, and I are probably the strongest here physically, so I think it would be a good idea if we paddled," to a few grunts and moans. "I'll help paddle," Hinata said. "If nothing else, it can be counted as helping strengthen my arms." Choji remarked, "So there are 6 of us that are paddling so far." Shika added, 7, and moved to the boat. "All right, you can steer," Ino said as he approached the boat. "Forehead, just make sure you don't drive us into a cliff." The pink-haired Kunoichi snarled, "Zip it, pig," as she positioned herself. Shikamaru was struck in the head by a stone after the group had been paddling and switching positions for about 20 minutes. At that point, they had a steady rhythm and could see the island. "What the hell?" Sakura yelled, "Oh crap, they're throwing stones at us." "Dodge!" exclaimed their silver-headed captain, tossing another set of stones. "Heads up," he said, launching another fist-sized stone. "It's up to you to lead them here uninjured, Haruno. They're the muscle and it's your brain right now." They barely made it in time. Shikamaru broke the silence after a few minutes of fruitless attempts to avoid the approaching rocks. "Okay, this is getting annoying. We aren't getting any closer." Kiba boldly retorted, "We have to get to the island, we don't have much choice." "Yeah, but do we have to use the oars?" "I don't think he said we have to, but how else would we get there?" Pulling his oar inward, Choji questioned, "Is that my cue, Shikamaru?" "You got it, big guy. Everyone, pull your oars in." All of the oars were inside the boat after a few curious glances and a few that seemed to be accusing him of being crazy. "Everyone get to the back of the boat. I'm going to need you as stabilizers," Shika said. Choji reached the front of the boat by the time everyone else was at the back. Body expansion. The boy's arms swelled to 30 times their size, and he began swimming the whole group in the direction of the island. However, the barrage of rocks continued, only increasing in frequency and speed. Hinata yelled, "Naruto! We must block for him. If he is injured, we will be even slower than we were before." After giving the boy a nod, the blonde moved to the boy's right and in front of him, while Hinata moved to the boy's left. They yelled, "Byakugan!" Simultaneously the rocks stopped after a few minutes, despite the two's excellent efforts to block most of them. Just when they thought they were finished, multiple figures were running directly at them. "Ah crap!" mumbled Kiba. 9 battered apprentices and 1 immaculate-looking boat were discovered on the island's shore 3 hours later. That was pathetic. The group turned to face a group of 5 shinobi, one of whom was the silver-haired man from earlier, and the other 4 of whom were masked and clearly identified as Anbu. Sakura exclaimed, "You didn't give us any kind of warning." The Anbu wearing a cat mask questioned, "Do you expect a warning from your enemies?" The pinkette quickly retorted, "And no, but you aren't our enemies." "You might want to rethink that statement," she responded. "We may be your allies, but in order to make you into true shinobi, we will hunt you down and attack you as if we weren't." "Anyway," the man with silver hair said, That was pathetic. You didn't formulate any sort of counter to our assault for nearly 5 minutes, and it took you nearly 10 to realize that just paddling your way to the island wouldn't be enough if you had been on an escort mission. The enemy would have been throwing kunai and shuriken at you, not rocks, and your employer would more than likely be dead. But sensei, Hinata started to formulate a rebuttal. No buts. You failed to get here without getting hit by rocks, and worse, when you saw your enemies approaching, you didn't launch a single jutsu. You waited until my clones reached you before you even attempted to stop me. Many of the group's young shinobi appeared devastated, while the others were just plain irritated. I don't care what kind of prodigies you think you are. There are always better. It's my job to make you see that you aren't good enough and to force you to get stronger. The man yelled, "You're out of your diapers now, kids. There's no mommy or daddy, sister, brother, best friend, nothing to help you except yourself and your new family." He raised both of his hands to indicate that he meant all 9 of them. There is no longer a top of the class or a bottom of the class. If one of you is doing bad, all of you are doing bad. It is your job to make sure they don't drag you down, because right now, you are all a single entity and the best you can do is what the worst among you can. With that one, he captured their interest. No Dobi class. No elite. How on earth had they gotten themselves into this situation? As I told you before, my name is Hitaki Kakashi, but you won't know me as that, said the individual, nor will you call me sensei. A sensei follows you around and wipes your ass if you get confused and forget where it is. You will call me Taicho or Captain. I guarantee you that I have earned the title, and if you disagree, you're welcome to try and best me. I will break limbs. Kiba and Sasuke went pale. Now before we start anything, there are a few things you need to know, said the man. First is the position of attention. Keep your feet together at a 45-degree angle and your knees together. Keep your back straight and puff out your chest. I don't care if you're a girl and it embarrasses you. I promise that if any of the boys here tries to catch a glimpse, he'll be punished severely. Keep your arms pinned to your sides and your fists balled, thumbs on the outside. The man took a moment to go around, checking each person's attempt at the position and correcting them as he went. This is the position you will be in when I go in for room inspection. This is the position you will be in when you're in the dining area. This is the position you will be in when you're in group. This is the position you will be in whenever I am in front of you. Do you get me? There were a few mumbled answers. I can't hear you. Get your foot out of your mouths and try again. Once more, he heard a few yeses, while others muttered nothing. What the hell didn't you get when I told you to speak up? This time he could hear their chorus clearly, but he was not finished. Congratulations. I could hear that one, but it was wrong. You will end every sentence you speak to me with, "Sir, try again." Yes, sir. Better. Follow these Anbu to your quarters. Men on one side, women on the other. When you get there, you'll find your training uniforms. You get 5 pairs of each, and it is your job to make sure they stay clean. You rip or destroy one, you're down one. You better take care of these clothes or you'll be doing your training in the nude. And I give you my word as a captain that I will make you do it. The students were led away by the Anbu and another chorus of yes sirs. Kakashi grinned to himself. Occasionally getting to yell at people felt nice. Kakashi was happy he accepted the role of Captain Overseer of the High No Cage project. Not many people received such an offer, and from the Hokage no less. However, at the moment, he was experiencing a migraine and a sense of exhaustion was starting to creep in. What on earth were these children being taught at the academy? The worst part was that they were ignorant of all the formal exercises, as well as the proper etiquette and deference to their superior officers. In fact, they had no idea how to scale trees without using their hands. He ran on top of the water to attack them, which is why they freaked out. The silver-haired captain grimaced and said, "The academy has gone way too far downhill since my day. After this goes to the next step, I'm going to have a conversation with Hokage-sama." As it was, he had been forcing the students to follow their schedules and practical exercises for 3 days, and now that the 4th day had arrived, he was starting to have as much fun as they did. Like an infected boil. But if his ninja training had taught him anything, it was to be persistent. A ninja was not someone who worked for his village, was a tool for his daimyo, or was just someone who practiced and studied jutsu, as many people thought. A ninja is simply someone who perseveres through torture, exercises, pain, dismemberment, or anything else. Their honor lies in never giving up, no matter how impossible the goal may be. Sadly, he was doubting it at the moment. He was still walking behind them and kicking the back of their knees when they locked them, which was at least amusing. The first week of the training should have been spent instilling their new training regimen in their minds. As he started to fold his bed linens, Kiba cried out, "What the hell is with that guy? You don't tell a guy to stand up straight and expect him not to stand up as straight as possible. You locked your knees, Kiba," Shino responded indignantly. You should have at least figured out not to lock them after the first time. This statement caused the Inuzuka to blush a little. Seeing his opportunity to poke fun at the boy, Sasuke said, I don't know, adding, I don't mind a little comedy relief in a place like this. Why you? Give it up, Kiba, said Shikamaru. It's not worth it, but seriously, what is up with this place? I expected some extra training, but this place. Yeah, said Naruto, I didn't think anyone trained like this. The silver-haired captain thought he should have anticipated this since they had been stranded on the island for 2 weeks. Leading the way into the outer wilderness, Kakashi demanded, what is wrong with you? Ino sputtered, trying to cover her eyes, I. You're too late and to want to quit, replied the man. If you really don't think you can do this, don't bother returning to your barracks tonight. What? The girl exclaimed, startled. I said don't return to your barracks, you don't deserve to look into the eyes of the family you're going to fail. This only made the girl's tears worse. You give up now and you fail them all. Your family, your beliefs, your friends back home, yourself. Behind her hands, the girl covered her face. Your father, he said in closing. No, the girl said as her sobs stopped. You're worthless, get the hell out of my sight. No, she said, standing still. I said get out of my sight. You're worthless. It's obvious you'll never amount to anything. You'll move through life with nothing but half-assed attempts at success and you'll die without making a single one of your dreams come true. Now get the hell out of here. I have no use for someone who's going to back out when it gets tough. Ino did not back down. What the hell are you waiting for? In response, she yelled, you're wrong. Am I? You've done nothing to prove me wrong. All you've shown me is your lack of spine. You're wrong. I'll prove you wrong. You think you can prove me wrong? Yes, I can. What was that? I said, yes I can. I don't think I heard that right. What was that sentence one more time? I said yes sir I can. I will prove you wrong. You'd better, get the hell back to your barracks. The blonde strode back to her friends after saying that. As she jumped from her perch, an Anbu wearing a cat mask said, for someone with mind tricks, she sure was easy to manipulate. She just needed the right motivation, she's always wanted to be like her father so I used that against her, replied Kakashi. We've all got our weaknesses Neko, it's digging them to the surface that becomes difficult. You're expecting good things from these kids? The silver-haired ninja said, no, I'm not expecting good things, before glaring at his comrade. I'm demanding the very best from every single one of them. 2 months had passed before Kakashi's charges reached the level he had anticipated when they were placed in his care. Being stuck with an Anbu captain who liked to keep his people in shape was one thing, but having to constantly be on guard and afraid for your life because that same Anbu captain had psychotic ways of making sure you were in shape was quite another. Even though they were friends, many of them were always on guard. Some of the high no-cage hopefuls recalled having seen Captain Hitaki a few times in the village, walking along reading some unknown book. None of them realized the entire time that they were walking past a psychopath. That's how they felt at the time. Anyway, in actuality, Kakashi's methods were very effective, and even though his apprentices disapproved of him more and more every minute, he knew that they would be a formidable force once he was done with them. As the captain stood in front of his small squadron, he said, well, now that we got the basics out of the way, I think it's about time we learned where each of you stand among the 4 main aspects of ninjutsu: taijutsu, ninjutsu, genjutsu, and stealth. With a hint of malice in his eyes, he said, don't worry, you won't miss your daily workout. There are just a few easy tests, and you should be finished with them before the day is over. Several of the ninja in front of him looked like their dreams had been crushed. They'd been doing their daily workout since day 2 of their arrival, and every time they began to get used to it, something new was added. That something is typically painful. The man first added what he called a jog, which he defined as a marathon. He put 2 pounds of weights on their legs for the run. After they had begun to get used to it, by the time their jog was over, the 2 pounds felt like 200. He added a swim after they eventually began to adjust to that. Initially, the 3 laps around the island weren't too difficult. Eventually, the group began to adjust to it, and then, surprise, he changed it up on them. While hidden Anbu were hurling rocks at them, they were now swimming around the island. The group was fairly certain that their captain had experienced some sort of misfortune as a child. Many speculated that he might have been escaping from someone and fell into a lake in the process. The person pursuing him then most likely attempted to throw rocks at him while he was swimming away. Shikamaru had been asked by Naruto to note the progress of their theory at this point, and he had a strong feeling that they would be expanding on it over the course of the following few weeks. As Shikamaru and Naruto had assumed, Kakashi added something to their exercise regimen, and the tests proved to be as lengthy and exciting as he had described. They would now have to dive in, swim for a minute, and then an Anbu would blow a whistle, telling the group to jump out of the water and run on top of the island, rather than just swimming around it. Another whistle would blow after a minute or so, and they would return to the water. What's the worst about this new routine, though? They doubled their laps and completed 6 rounds of the island according to Kakashi. They swam 3 laps and ran 3 laps around it. They were at odds, but it didn't really matter. Which preceded this dreary day, the sun was obscured by dark gray clouds, and the water surrounding the island had risen a little but not enough to cause concern. As he and the group headed to their training area, Naruto asked, "What are the odds you think it's gonna rain, Shika? It kinda smells like rain." "Kiba?" the Nara said languidly, "I don't know." The Inuzuka responded, "I'm surprised it hasn't started yet. The air is saturated with moisture. Pretty high up there," she said after taking a deep breath. "But I doubt our fair captain will let us skip out on any of our exercises," Sasuke responded, the distaste that permeated his. "I doubt he'd give us a break even if it started raining fire hell. He'd probably tell us to dodge the stuff as we ran on top of the water." "Sounds about right," the blonde said, moving his hands to his head. As the High-No-Kage assembled, Kakashi said, "All right, due to the gloomy circumstances, you're going to be skipping the Mara jog today." "Did hell just freeze over?" Naruto asked his slothful companion in a whisper. "No telling." With a clear attempt at a positive smile, the man concluded, "And instead, we're going to be tripling your water exercises." His eye closed. The faces of his students' defeats were his only reward, but to him, that was more than enough. "Now let me show you why." His young charges did their best to follow him as he swiftly fled to the trees. The man was still inherently faster than them despite all of their running. Naruto whimpered as he followed his captain. "He's a demon." He heard a chuckle in his mind for some reason. But Kakashi signaled the group to stop before he could ask anyone else if they heard it. Before the group was one of the most terrifying sights they'd ever seen. As far as they could see, they were encircled by water because, as they remembered, this island was actually a few hundred miles out into the ocean. However, now, as the ocean roared and lightning flashed, funnels of water rose all the way into a nearly black sky. The sky appeared to be burning a blood red with the little sunlight that did reach the earth. When Kakashi said, "What you're seeing now is an anomaly," all of his students turned to pay attention. Sakura added, "What do you mean, Captain?" "This is something most people never see in their lives." The Junin with silver hair responded, "There is a mixture of fire, water, wind, earth, and lightning in this storm. Fire from the sun, water from the ocean, wind from the hurricanes, earth from the jagged rocks being torn from the sea and sent vaulting into the storm, and lightning from the very center of the electric storm itself. This is known as a joining of the elements. Every element is at war here. Every element is working together here. They battle with themselves and against everything around them." The storm itself had taken the students' attention away from their captain. With their recent chakra control exercises, they were able to maintain their footing even though the winds had grown strong enough to bend the trees behind them. "I have already ordered all our supplies for survival underground. You don't have to worry about any of your possessions not surviving this onslaught. The only thing you have to worry about surviving it is yourself and your brothers and sisters. The storm will hit the island in less than 10 minutes. Your job isn't just to complete 18 laps. No, scratch that. You don't have to do any laps. All you have to do is survive." As if he had suddenly gained a second head, the group gazed at him. "It's just the 9 of you now. I'll be watching, but you'll never know I'm there if you're dying. I won't save you. Good luck." Their captain vanished after making his final remarks. Kiba encapsulated their situation quite succinctly. "This is turning into one hell of a trip. 10 minutes my." Shikamaru cut in, saying, "Kiba, now isn't the time to be complaining, it's for running." They were now making every effort to find cover as the storm hit the island earlier than Kakashi had anticipated. "There's a cave in the rock face," Hinata exclaimed, flinching as the hail began to fall. After a few exhausting moments, the group had gathered inside the cave. "I know we're tired guys," said Shikamaru, "and I personally would love nothing more than to just lay down and fall asleep, but we've got to do a bit of planning." "I agree," Naruto said, drawing the group's attention, "but we have something else to do beforehand." Sasuke, the boy with the obsidian eyes, glanced at him. Sakura, the kunoichi, turned to face him. "We need firewood with the hail and rain. We need to gather it as soon as possible. Can I get you two to join me in scavenging some?" Sakura followed a moment after Sasuke nodded his head. "We'll be back in soon. Can it wait until then?" "I'll join you," Kiba responded. "That way we can go off in 2 different directions." Shika said, "Hurry back, guys," and they started to leave. "Kiba," I yelled, "it's useless. It's either too wet or too alive." Naruto searched the trees and inquired, "Have you ever heard of squaw wood?" Squaw wood? Yeah, it's actually a condition of wood more than a type of it. No matter how wet squaw wood gets, it still burns. I surveyed the ground. Certainly, there were various wood fragments everywhere, some larger than others or of varying hues, but nothing particularly caught my attention as that type of wood. The blonde handed me 2 pieces of wood, and it was easy to tell which was lighter than normal and which was of normal weight. Well, like I said, he said, returning to my side with a regular piece of wood in both hands. Squaw wood is a condition of wood. I'm sure you've noticed which is which, the brunette said. In spite of my silence, squaw wood has reached the middle mark between being dead and being alive. Green doesn't burn easily, but neither does black. Squaw wood has lost all its moisture and, being dead, it can't get it back without rotting. A lot of times squaw wood is still attached to trees. To make a point, the Hyuga simply severed a tree's visibly dead limb. And it's easiest to find it there. I was starting to grow weary of being rained on and hailed on, so I asked, alright, then why are we searching the ground too? It sounds like a waste of time. Why not just go for the ones on the trees? The boy picked up a few pieces of wood from the ground and shouted, because it just started storming, over a loud clap of thunder. So we should grab as much from the forest floor as possible before it absorbs too much water. I nodded in agreement. The plan and the point were sound, but there was one aspect that unnerved me a little. How do you know all this? After a moment of glazed eyes, the blonde said, sorry, I'd rather not talk about it. Fair enough. It was clearly something that had previously had a significant negative impact on him that resonated with me. I screamed as the earth shook with another thunderclap. Alright, what say you to hurrying up and getting out of this mess? I'm with you on that one, Shikamaru. It wasn't too bad at first, but now that the other 4 had left, Ino hadn't stopped talking, and it was just plain annoying. He had heard her say, I can't believe Taicho did this to us, 3 times already, and he was starting to believe he was being caught in a genjutsu. He muttered the release and moved his hands in the correct seal, but nothing came of it. I'm in hell, that's all. What is he thinking? Forcing us to go through with this and disappearing. He feeds us the false information about how far away the storm is. I can't wait till this storm ends. I'm so not letting him hear the end of this. Tomorrow he'll wish he never came up with this stupid idea. My interruption was, Ino, I doubt he lied about the storm on purpose. She responded, displaying her defiant nature. I don't care. You know I just can't wait for this storm to end so I can go to the bunker and sleep in my bed. Looking out into the storm, Shoji said, don't get your hopes too high. I don't think this storm will be ending anytime soon. My gaze strayed to my bigger companion. I had to agree with him because we had known each other since before the academy, so it was inevitable that we would influence one another in some way. There was a hint of caution in Taicho's gaze. This storm wasn't going to pass through easily, so how long were we expected to live independently? I had intended to bring up this topic with the group when the others got back. They were going to require some kind of command line if they were to truly survive this storm. Being individuals and equals was all well and good, but in a situation where it came down to life or death, those with the knowledge or experience were better suited to lead the others. Simply put, life expectancy was higher that way. Naturally, this resulted in a number of issues. I was aware that Sakura had everyone beat in terms of book smarts and that I was probably the most strategic and well-prepared member of the group, but that wasn't necessary at the moment. I looked around at the other 4 people in the cave. None of us had any idea what it was like to live in the wilderness by yourself. I knew it for sure. There was no guesswork here. Sasuke and Naruto were the only people who had experienced life without help. There is only so much you can learn from a book. Even though we were all taught survival skills in the academy, only those 2 were capable of thriving, not just surviving. Ino shouted, wake up, and threw a ration bar at my head. I managed to catch it before my eyes went glassy again. I noticed that Choji began, Shika, and asked, what's on your mind? I glanced at my best friend and noticed the resolve in his eyes. He understood what I was thinking, and I had a good feeling he was thinking the same thing. We need to discuss a few things when the others return, I responded. How long do you believe this storm will last? We all looked in the direction of the voice. Even though Shino didn't talk much, everyone could hear what he had to say. Ino's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets as I said, I honestly don't know, holding my fist to my chin. But judging from what I saw of the storm before we came here, it could last a few days at best, or a few weeks at worst. What? Exclaimed our group's blonde in an attempt to calm the girl. Hinata said, Ino, calm down, we're ninja for a reason. This storm won't stop us, and it's just a little discomfort. It appeared as though Ino wanted to cry. I mumbled, so troublesome. Kiba. Alright, I think that about does it for me. You ready, Naruto? At the moment, the blonde was using his leg to lift a log and balance it before tossing it into the air. Clunk, he said as he walked over to me. Yeah, I'm ready, adding, this should at least last us through the night. We had been looking for wood for about 30 minutes and were completely soaked. I was fairly certain that the hail would cause me to wake up whilst we arrived at the meeting spot and waited for the other two after walking for a further minute or two. I practically yelled, how long do you think this storm will last? The rain had begun to fall heavily, and everything sounded like it was being muffled out except for a dull roar. I don't know, Naruto shot back, turning to face me, but given the current state of affairs, I don't think it will stop before the end of the day. This could go on for a long time. I had feared the same thing. This didn't seem to be an exception to the rule that our teachers had always taught us to look underneath. Taicho genuinely believed that we would make it through the storm, no matter how long it took. I see them. The two of us met in the center. Sasuke exclaimed, looks like you two had some luck, as he crammed wood into his own arms. Yeah, thanks to Blondie here we can get started on the fire right away. Let's get back to camp, I replied. After a brief pause, Sakura said, wait, guys, do you hear that? It turned out that a loud noise was coming from the north. I instantly wished I hadn't turned my head. Oh crap, mudslide, run, Naruto screamed as he charged ahead. Shikamaru. They sure are taking their time. Although the temperature had started to decrease by this point, the rain had compelled the young shinobi to remove their outermost garments. As I said, they'll be here soon, Ino. Something was wrong, and I felt a chill go down my spine. The four of them rushed into the cave entrance with fear in their eyes just as I was ready to get up. The others were startled when Kiba yelled, we need to get as far away from the entrance as possible. Why? Ino asked. Sticking to her seat I yelled, Ino, get up, we're moving, and grabbed multiple packs of equipment. Choji jumped right in, grabbing multiple packs with his partial expansion. Mind explaining? Kiba started to say, the rains caused a, but was interrupted when the ground shook and mud poured in through the cave entrance and over our previous seat. Shino arched an eyebrow as Naruto selected a location to place the wood. So that's what my insects were nervous about, a mudslide. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how it happened, but before we knew it, it was plowing down the mountain behind us. We're lucky we picked a cave facing the storm and not one facing away from it, said the brunette. You're right, I replied quickly. Let's get the fire started. I'm sure we're all cold and you four look drenched to the bone. I suggest stripping and putting your clothes over the fire. I couldn't help but chuckle because Naruto had already started undressing before I had a chance to speak. Ino exclaimed, flushed, hey, there are ladies present. Sasuke interrupted, stripping off his clothes as well. There are no ladies present here, only shinobi. I would much rather have the group here see me naked or for me to see the same of all of you than die of hypothermia. With his eyes meeting Sakura's, Naruto said, I don't think it will kill us. We'll just have to sit close enough to the fire for them to dry too. We should at least leave our underwear on, he said. The pink-haired girl was probably more grateful to the blonde than she had ever been in her life. Either way, the only one of us here anywhere near adept at Kaiden jutsus is you, Sasuke, I said. Could I convince you to light the fire for us? It might take a while if we try it the old-fashioned way. I could tell I had won him over by the smirk on his face. Naruto said, so, I know all of you from the academy, as he opened with the sound of firewood clacking. But I don't really know many of you personally. I think some real introductions would be a good start to this training of ours. Well, Kiba said, you're the first man since you started it. The blonde laughed a little. He ought to have anticipated that. All right. Where to begin? He responded with a phony monologue. Well, I was an orphan for the first 8 years of my life, until the day that I activated my Byakugan. I'm sure everyone here remembers that day. It was also the same day I was adopted into the Hyuga clan. I specialize in Hyuga clan taijutsu. The Jukanai like ramen, gardening, hanging out with friends, and training. The Inuzuka joked, so this whole ordeal must be some kinda aphrodisiac to you, huh? Beside him, Naruto chuckled and said, well, not really. I prefer more controlled conditions. Well, you're up, Kiba. As far as family is concerned, I'm from the Inuzuka clan and have a mother and a sister who both make me feel extremely afraid. I don't know much about my father, and my mother won't tell me anything, so I doubt I'll ever find out. He must have done something really horrible to make her feel that way, but then again, maybe not. That's just the way she is. I am also a taijutsu specialist, but I typically practice with my partner, Akamaru, who was unable to travel with us. My family uses soldier pills to make up for our chakra eating techniques, and our hyper-developed noses give us a sense of smell that rivals that of a nin hound. Kiba gave Shikamaru a nod. I suppose it's my turn. I don't have any siblings, but both of my parents are still living. My father is the chief strategist for Konoha and a member of the council the Naras, my clan, are experts at using shadows. They can be used for anything from strangulation to restraint. Most people I meet tell me I'm smart, but this is more a result of my genetic makeup than anything else. My family is a group of strategists. We know how to best control a situation by removing all negative elements and playing with the minds of our opponents. Choji. My father, Akamichi Shuza, is a member of the Konoha Council, and my mother is a homemaker. I don't have any siblings. My specialty is calorific jutsu, and I'm from the Akamichi clan. I'm pretty big boned. As you've probably noticed, this is because the jutsu our family uses manipulates our body size, requiring us to use both chakra to build our muscles and bones and calories to prevent our bodies from starving themselves to death. I know a few minor doden jutsus in addition to our clan jutsu, but nothing particularly useful. My father, Inoichi, is the head of the clan and a council member of Konoha, but my parents also own a flower shop in town. From replacing a person's consciousness with our own to searching through a corpse's memories to discover what it knew before passing away, we specialize in mind control techniques. Sakura. I now live alone because my parents were assassinated 2 days after I enrolled in the academy. Although my taijutsu is only mediocre and I only know the 3 basic academy jutsu, I have a thorough understanding of how techniques work and a quick enough mind to apply them in most situations. You guys will likely learn a lot about my silent responses because I don't really like to talk a lot. She gave Sasuke a head nod. I am the last devoted member of my clan and the only survivor of the Uchiha massacre. There are a lot of strong Kaiden jutsus that I know, but not many that are weaker. I have only been studying my clan's taijutsu, the receiving fist, for a few months, but I know very little about it. It is useless until I awaken my clan's dojutsu, the Sharingan. My name is Aburame Shino, and my father, Aburame Shibi, is the leader of our clan and a member of Konoha's council. We are experts at using Kikai destruction bugs, and when a clan member is born, their body is presented to the bugs in return for their assistance. Our insects consume our chakra, but when we call upon them, they can also eat through solid objects or consume our enemy's chakra. Naruto interrupted. Sounds useful, and Shika nodded his head in agreement. Ino shuddered. I am the Hyuga clan's heiress. Hyuga Hinata, my younger sister, Hanabi, is second in line for the heiress, and my father, Hyuga Hiyashi, is the head of the clan and a member of the Konoha Council. When my Imouto was born, my mother died. Although the Juken is my area of expertise, I'm researching its foundations to see if it can also be utilized as a long-range art form. I suppose now that introductions are out of the way, Shika said. Wait a second, Kiba said, is this a little weird, or is it just me? What are you saying? Did Ino ask? All of us are the offspring of influential clans or council members. Doesn't anyone find this a little strange? Shino responded, not everyone here is from a clan, Kiba, citing Sakura and Naruto as examples. However, there is merit to your idea. When we meet with Taicho following the conclusion of this trial, we ought to ask him. Kiba gave a satisfied nod of his head. In any case, Shika went on, I believe we require a base chain of command. Why? At the question, Shikamaru's hand touched his face. Because I'd like to survive, Ino. With wide eyes, the girl asked, what do you mean by that? This situation isn't life-threatening, is it? All right, I'm irritated. Indeed, Ino. This is a potentially fatal circumstance. We might not survive. When that mudslide occurred a few minutes ago, did you not even pay attention? You would be dead now if you were still sitting there. We will hardly be able to make it out here without a chain of command. Shoji calmly said, calm down, Shika, and placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. He's right, Naruto said to him. We need some sort of command structure, and we're better off putting the people who've survived in the wilderness or survived alone at the top of it. Sasuke stepped in and said, there are only 3 of us that we are aware of. Sakura, myself, and Naruto. After calming down a little, Shika went on, my thoughts exactly, but there's more to this situation than that. We must dig our way out of here or go deeper into the cave to see if there is another way out. We also need a supply of food. We have some timber, but it won't be enough to get us through this ordeal. For now, I suggest we leave both Naruto and Sasuke in charge, considering they've got the most experience with wilderness survival, and we can use their advice to our advantage. Myself and Sakura are among the most intelligent of us, so we'll hold the final bar on group decisions. All of us, however, are going to be grunt labor. We will need to get dirty, of that there's no doubt, and I hope everyone here will be willing to do so when it happens. For now, I think we should get some sleep. We've got a lot to do tomorrow. After 2 hours, Ino. I can't believe this is happening. Try not to worry about it, Ino. The voice caused my head to jerk toward it. Hinata. What are you doing up this late? The way the young girl smiled at me made me trust her. I knew I had to get it off my chest somehow. I've been having some reoccurring nightmares lately, but that doesn't really matter. What's eating away at you, Ino? She asked. Taicho left us in the wilderness to die, Hinata saw. Just Hinata, please, the girl with the pale eyes said. Okay. Hinata, I almost quit our training a few weeks ago. I made an effort to conceal my gaze through my locks. I just couldn't take it. I knew it would be difficult to become ninja, but I wasn't ready for this. I don't know if I can make it through it. The girl comforted him. Ino, for whom are you doing this? What do you mean? Why are you a ninja? Are you doing it for yourself? Your family? Is there some person out there that you're doing this for? Why yes, my father, he's always been there for my mother and me. I just want to make him proud of me. There's not a whole lot the Hyuga clan's eyes miss, she said quietly, but I don't need my eyes to see how proud of you your father is. Every day when we were younger, I would watch the other students leave with their parents before the house guard would come and pick me up. I used to watch your mother and father come and pick you up, as well as all the others' parents. I even watched the kids that didn't have any parents leave on their own. I had never seen such an odd range of emotions play across the girl's face before, but Hinata's eyes were captivating. Her eyes flickered through a range of emotions, from envy to sadness, gradually changing color as each emotion subsided. Was this another Byakugan characteristic? Among all of the children from the academy, it was easy to tell your father doted on you the most. I don't think you have anything to worry about there. I couldn't tell why, but the way she spoke convinced me. My eyes seemed to show relief. So the real question is, do you want to keep doing this? My eyes widened. She was right. What was I doing? Was my father the only one who needed it? Think on it, Ino. The pale-eyed girl then went back to her sleeping bag. Wait, Hinata. Yes. You asked me why I'm a ninja, and I can't help but wonder why are you? I'm a Hyuga. We all join the academy and become ninja, some more successful than others. So you're just doing this because you're being told to? I barely saw the girl flick her eyes toward the camp during her brief pause. No, there is one other reason why. There's someone I look up to and admire. And I wish to accompany him at every turn. However, her eyes spoke for her. She didn't have to say that part. The emotion was so obvious and genuine that it could only have come directly from her heart. I grinned as the girl made her way back to the camp. I understand, Hinata, I said. If she was prepared to pursue her dream, why shouldn't I? Ultimately, my desire to become a ninja began long before I desired my father's approval. None of the group was awake enough to hear the faint cracking above the dying embers in the fire, nor did they notice the root of a tree that had started to grow and move from the soil above them. After 9 hours, as the silver-haired Junin demanded, "What the hell is wrong with you, Tenzo?" After taking off his mask to reveal a younger, brown-haired man, and Anbu said, "Sir, what are you talking about?" "You know damned well what I'm talking about. I ordered everyone here not to interfere with the cadet's trial." "But sir," with his face flushed with rage, Kakashi interrupted, saying, "I don't give a damn about your reasons. The next time you disobey my orders, you're off this project. If I decide not to have you arrested." "But sir," Tenzo tried to offer an explanation. "I said no excuses. Do you understand me? I didn't do anything," the Anbu exclaimed. "Then how do you explain the root of a tree hyper-accelerating its growth to bust a hole in a mud and rock wall so the cadets could get to freedom? It happened less than an hour after you arrived. I told you it wasn't me. Sir, lying to and talking back to your superiors is a great offense. Kenpai. You're about to get yourself into a hell of a lot of shit." "Sir," cried a bear-masked Anbu. "I arrived with Tenzo and spent the first several hours getting updated on the situation with him. Not once during that time did he even attempt to mold chakra." "Fine," the captain murmured, "since the two of you are so hell-bent on following through with your little story, I have a new assignment for you." Tenzo covered his face with his deer mask. "If deer didn't do this, find out who did." When Kakashi blinked, the two vanished. The 9 shinobi were awakened by a deep rumble, and Sakura stood up with a strange sense of relief and intense curiosity, for the earthen wall formed by the mudslide the day before had been torn apart by a giant tree root, leaving a hole large enough to allow escape. The pink-haired cadet sighed, "Thank goodness," but it hurt to try to breathe again. "What?" Ino sighed. Having the same issue upon closer examination, it was discovered that the blonde Hyuga was the only member of their group who was not having trouble breathing. With what little light she had, Ino rushed to the wall and started examining it. "Oh no," she moaned, briefly resting her head against the wall, "we must go right now." She hurriedly collected her belongings and started putting them away in the appropriate scrolls. "Ino, what's wrong?" Shika started to panic as well and huffed out. She clarified, "This cave is infested with a black mold. I didn't notice it last night because we didn't have much light. It was triggered by the fire we were having, and since the entrance was blocked by the mudslide the other day, the only place the spores could go was inside of us." Shikamaru turned to face the exit, but all he saw was a puzzled, "What the?" "We don't have time to ask questions, Shika," Naruto told us. "We need to get out of here, so start packing." After finishing her own, she hurried over to assist Choji in packing. "If we inhale the spores much longer, they will eventually begin tearing down our immune systems and affected our muscles and organs," she added. "It could even kill us." She opened a second scroll and threw it to her plump friend. She paused for a moment before saying, however, you're not even breathing hard. Isn't the mold getting to you?" With a bewildered tone, Naruto replied, "It might be. You must have one powerful immune system." Despite his wry smile, the blonde had the grace to appear ashamed. Wincing as he watched the hail pelt the mud, Kiba walked to the cave's entrance and asked, "So where are we headed from here?" "To higher ground," Sasuke replied as he accompanied Kiba. "We'll be looking for something similar to this cave. Any natural formations that can be used as shelter are our best bet. They're more likely to survive this weather than anything we make." Naruto turned back to the group and asked, "Ready, guys?" He looked into Sasuke's eyes after 7 nods. After another quick nod, the shinobi vanished. 2 weeks. The island had changed drastically in appearance in the 2 weeks since the storm began. Many of the worn trails had been destroyed by debris or the seemingly endless torrent of water and hail, and there were lakes where flats had once been. It appeared as though the funnels had their own thoughts and only appeared when the shinobi deemed it safe. As the hurricanes had come and gone several times, despite all of the island's hazards, the group remained upbeat. Even when Kiba was hit in the side by a flying tree branch, the only injuries sustained thus far were minor. Fortunately, Sakura had been practicing small-scale medical jutsu. Without her prompt action, Kiba might have suffered much more damage. Although the island's native animals had long since fled, the group had frequently been fortunate enough to spot a pinned raccoon, deer, or even fish that had been accidentally thrown onto the island. Yes, the group was doing pretty well overall, until now. In an attempt to locate food, Naruto, Hinata, Sakura, and Choji had ventured near the ocean. They had talked about going out to the water to try to find fish because they were running low, but they didn't go very far. Sakura shouted, "Hinata!" As the heiress struggled to stay alive, they were barely out of the tree's cover when the twister struck. Not 20 yards ahead of them. It was incredible how quickly it came down. Even though Naruto ran straight up the tree to grab Hinata, Choji swiftly stretched his arm out to reach the limb she was clinging to. However, both of them arrived too late. The branch provided. Choji's final memory of Naruto and Hinata was of Naruto snatching her before they were both thrown into the sea. Choji attempted to explain the situation, but Ino screamed, "Gone." "What do you mean gone?" "Exactly what I said. They were sucked into the storm." "Oh no, we'll see them again," Sasuke said casually, causing the Yamanaka to look puzzled. "If anyone could survive out there, it's those two." "Sasuke's right," said Shikamaru, "and we have a bigger problem. We're still short on food and water. I hate to say it, but we can't focus our efforts into finding the two of them, and their disappearance will make it easier for us to survive. We have to rely on them to find us." "They're our teammates, our friends," exclaimed Ino. "You can't be serious? And how much use will we be to them if we're on our last legs from starvation?" Ino closed her mouth regardless of her desire to locate them. Shikamaru's observations were valid. She needed to believe in them. "If they get close enough, we can find them," the group said, turning to Shino, who had just uttered his first meaningful sentence in days. "I planted a few of my female Kakaichu on them. They release a scent completely odorless to all but the males of their species. I can track them when they get close enough." With an odd expression on her face, the blonde said, "To be absolutely honest, Shino, I'm both impressed and completely disgusted by that. You'll get used to it. Nothing at all. No chakra residue, no signs of a summon. It's like the tree just grew on its own." The bear-masked Anbu interrupted, saying, "Dear, let's be honest here. This is a chakra storm. You didn't expect there to be a residual chakra trail, did you?" "Not particularly," replied Deer, "but I was really hoping it would be easy to identify. As it stands, there are only two, no, technically 3 real options on what's happened here. An enemy did this, the storm did this, or wait a second, this is a chakra storm." Bear responded by nodding his head. Bear nodded, confirming Deer's hypothesis. "That would mean, could one of the candidates have done this? That means that this would have an accelerated effect on all creatures exposed to it for an extended period of time, right? That couldn't be possible, could it?" Bear froze. "We're headed back to camp. The Hokage needs to be informed." It was dark in the cave. It was dark and wet, and to make things worse, it was freezing. Placing the unconscious Hinata a few yards from the cave's entrance, Naruto stood shivering. Was this cave known to Taicho? Naruto gave a headshake. Did it really make a difference whether he had or hadn't? The fact that the blonde hadn't noticed this cave in his lapse wasn't easily discounted. even though it's not like this was covered in their training course. As he knelt down to check on Hinata, the boy muttered to himself, blue lips. Crap, she's getting hypothermia and I don't have any means to set a fire. We can't go back into the ocean as long as those twisters are going on. Naruto hastily wrapped Hinata in his clothing after stripping down to his pants. They're wet, but they'll do for now, just need to warm her up before I get going. After searching for 10 minutes or so, Naruto discovered a path that led deeper into the cave. After a minute of reflection, he concluded that this was the best way for him and Hinata to escape. This situation couldn't possibly get any worse, could it? 2 days had passed since the two Hyugas were swept away by the storm, and in spite of what Shika had told Ino, he had been guiding the group to what he believed might be locations where the two would make a makeshift camp, saying they were good places to look for food. Naturally, Sasuke was assisting him with that problem. As long as they both agreed on the location, the other members of the group would be in the dark. Naturally, that was not to say they were incorrect either. They had undoubtedly discovered food, berries, edible plants, and occasionally a few rabbits there, but they never even noticed any indication that Naruto or Hinata had visited, a further factor that may have contributed to the storm. It did not allay Shikamaru's concerns. Even though they had never met before joining the program, they had gone through the same struggles as he had, exchanged ideas, scrounged food together, and even offered consolation when they were feeling down about their chances of surviving. No, they were now family and no longer strangers. Family members also never give up on one another. Walking next to Shikamaru, Sasuke said, "This isn't looking good," adding, "There's no sign of them at all. We have to keep looking, you know they wouldn't give up on us." "Yeah, I know." Shikamaru settled in a nearby tree grove and glanced at the others. "I don't think anyone else here realizes the impact this training's having on us," the genius said, ardently conversing with Choji as Ino assisted him in gathering berries. "No, not at all." "You think one of those kids has Mokuton?" Kakashi said, staring at the two Anbu with disbelief. "Yes sir," Deer said, his tone demonstrating how certain he was of his charge. "You think that one of those brats is the descendant of the Shodai Hokage? That somehow, along the way, he had an indiscretion that led to having a child with someone other than his wife, because we all know that Tsunade is the last of the Senju. Is that what you're saying?" Knowing that this was probably the only way he could escape this situation without being court-martialed and having his chakra sealed, Tenzo took to one knee in fear. He had never seen Kakashi so furious. "Forgive my accusation. Taicho, that was beyond subordination. Forgive my words," Tenzo exclaimed. "Tenzo, you've just walked into a S-class secret." Both of Anbu's eyes widened with surprise. "Your silence is demanded. You will say nothing of this to anyone. This investigation never happened. Are we clear?" "Hi, Taicho." Naruto wanted to repeatedly slap himself with a big rock. Could things get any worse? What made him think that? In an instant, the scene changed from looking up to looking down. Initially, it was the fact that Hinata was still asleep. Yes, she was breathing, but the hypothermia was still present and lingering in the background, along with her fever. That damned cliff came in second. He had climbed it fairly easily, until he tripped over a loose rock and fell more than halfway down, severing his leg from ankle to kneecap. He was fortunate not to fall all the way because he doubted the sharp rocks at the bottom would have been understanding. Third, a brief lesson in water walking was imparted to him. The amount of weight applied to the surface affected the chakra output. He had made the decision to cross the lake he had discovered without giving it any second thought, but he hadn't considered Hinata's weight because she was strapped to his back. That is, until his chakra finally caught after he was waist deep in the icy water. The main problem, though, was that he never seemed to find an end to this cave, no matter how far he walked. Since the cave had led primarily upward, he was certain that he was headed in the right direction and should have reached the surface by now. Even worse, it seemed as though the cave's walls were saturated with chakra, making it impossible for him to see in the correct direction with his Byakugan when he activated it. All he saw was the story-like glow of chakra permeating everything. He continued to walk, which was the only thing he could do. NGHN Naruto. At last. A lucky break. "Hinata, how are you feeling?" Even though the area around them appeared to be fairly well lit, the heiress noticed how dark it was. "Where are we?" "I have no clue," replied the brunette. "We washed into this cave after we were pulling into the ocean. We couldn't go back out into the water, so I went ahead and carried you into the cave. Got lucky and found a few branches along the way. We're really lucky. Sasuke taught us that basic Kaden jutsu, else we'd be wandering blind." After glancing at the torch Naruto was holding, Hinata turned to face herself and saw that she was wearing his shirt over hers. Naruto saw her response. "Don't take it off. You're suffering from hypothermia. We were stuck in the water for about an hour before I managed to get us in the cave," she said, I'm still so tired." With a nod, Naruto leaned down and lifted her, saying, "It's okay. Rest as much as you need, focus on getting better, we might be down here for a while." The man shuffled the papers in front of him and said, "We can't afford to miss it, this kind of phenomenon only occurs once every 100 or so years, we're leaving in a few hours." He said, "Bring any materials you may need once we get there, we start immediately, and we won't be leaving until the storm subsides, prepare for an extended stay." The group gathered in front of him bowed in response. The man was left alone in his office as the group swiftly dispersed. He put his hands together and muttered to himself after a brief period of silence. "Thank you for this chance, Raikage-sama. When we're done, the leaf won't know what hit them." Run. Even with blurred vision, there were screams and hazy pictures of people running for their lives from flickering, deep red blurs that could only be fires. There should have been some coherency despite the explosion that caused a nearby building to collapse and spread dust, debris, and burning wood everywhere. The issue was that despite the fires and explosions, there was a pervasive sense of dread that something larger was present, something much more dangerous than anything had ever been. Then, with a speed that could be considered inhuman, a dark figure emerged about 20 yards away and began to approach her. She felt as though every step it took was a tremor, as though it were bringing her one step closer to the depths of hell. She would be able to see its face in a few more feet, and she would be almost there. Then the image vanished, leaving behind nothing but a burning pain that screamed at her, burned into her brain, and clawed its way to the surface to be permanently inscribed there. One sentence, one thought, and one fact: "Beware the destroyer of worlds," were indelibly etched in her memory with a high-pitched, shrieking scream. Shortly after awakening to shrieking, Hinata discovered it was her own. Although she had been experiencing frequent nightmares lately, none of them had been as explicit as that one, and more importantly, none of them had given her that warning. Even as Naruto crooned in her ear that it was only a dream, she shivered and gripped her own arms as tears streamed down her cheeks. It wasn't a dream, it couldn't have been a dream. No dream could have affected a person in that way. Her own mind could not possibly distort reality and become obsessed with something so harmful, so destructive, so evil. She could not compare the power she felt to anything she had ever experienced before. Even on his best day, her father's power might as well have been a fly attempting to defeat a Kaiden jutsu with a single beat of its right wing. No, it wasn't a dream at all, and she was warned about it, one that would live in her memory forever. Hinata stumbled and said, "And Naruto?" He sat down next to her and asked, "What is it? Have you ever heard of someone called the Destroyer of Worlds?" Her question was more than answered by the perplexed expression on his face. He didn't know what she was discussing. "I don't think so." "Never mind then, it's no big deal." At this point, Hinata's stomach let out a loud growl, and she found herself staring down at it with a face red enough to replace their old torch. Fortunately, it had already been extinguished. She was grateful that Naruto couldn't see her blush in the darkness of the cave. The blonde said, removing his last shirt, "I'll go see if I can find anything. We passed a lake about a half-mile back. I wouldn't be surprised if it had fish in it." "I hope you don't mind cave sushi," he said. Hinata said, "That would be great, Naruto-kun," feeling a little better now that Naruto's humor was beginning to show. "It's settled then, I'll be back as soon as I can." Hinata lay down again after Naruto had moved out of earshot after that nightmare. She was determined not to let sleep take her, but the idea of the world-destroying monster kept coming to her mind. "It's perfect." "What was that, Shika?" The genius said, "Shoji, this place is perfect," as he circled the cave. "Most of the places we've been in so far have been too shallow, too small, or too narrow. I believe we've found our permanent home because this place is the ideal size for actual occupancy." Shoji used this opportunity to survey the area. Shikamaru was correct. It appeared ideal. A tiny lake appeared to run deeper beneath the cave wall in one of its corners, and the walls themselves appeared to be entirely devoid of any vegetation. Overall, it was a respectably sized place to stay, with the walls spaced about 20 feet apart and the ceiling at least 15 feet high. Sasuke said, "In that case, we can start stocking, instead of just gathering for the moment," as he made his way over to the two. Exactly. They were somewhat aware that this was their resurgence. 2 weeks had passed since Naruto and Hinata had been drugged into the sea and had been split up from their High-no-Kage family, and now they could finally see the light of day. Naturally, the two were unaware that 2 weeks had gone by because they had been in complete darkness and cut off from all traces of the worldly cycle. All they knew was that they hadn't felt the warmth of the surface in far too long. Naruto now felt as though he was completely cold. He would have claimed, if he didn't know any better, that his body's natural temperature had decreased by a few degrees, as if it were attempting to adjust to life underground even though it was mid-autumn. This point was only highlighted when they eventually broke the surface and he felt the heat rush over his body. "Wow, what is it, Naruto?" I didn't think we'd actually make it out of there if I didn't know any better. I'd say we circled the island some 200 or 300 times, he laughed. Hinata answered wearily, that's about how it felt. My feet feel like they're going to fall off. Well, we've finally surfaced. Did you want to take a break? No, not yet. Wait, do you hear that? It was heard by Naruto. It sounded almost like a faint scream. The blonde said, let's check it out, with skill. The two then disappeared into the treetops with all the elegance and swiftness of a shinobi. With his Sharingan spinning wildly, Sasuke looked at the strangers and said, do you see that, Shika? The genius looked into Sasuke's eyes and said, not the same way you do, but yes, I see it. A few days earlier, Sasuke had successfully awakened his bloodline, narrowly avoiding Ino and Kiba. I don't really understand it, Sasuke continued. I see varying chakra spikes in that machine, like it's trying to use chakra to form something. After pausing for a moment to reflect, Shikamaru said, this isn't good. What are foreigners even doing on this island? Nothing good. Get the others were nipping whatever's happening down there in the bud. Sasuke disappeared. Shikamaru was aware that he would have to use the few minutes before his return to come up with some kind of plan. But there were a lot of unknowns. What if the adversary was aware of their presence? What if they had much more combat experience? If there was one thing the Nara heir wanted to know, it was the facts, and he might as well be winging it in this case. Standing in the trees across the clearing from Sasuke and Shika, Naruto and Hinata were also gazing at the device, but they were aware of the presence of the others. The Byakugan couldn't miss much, but as long as that foreign shinobi had any sense of his surroundings, they weren't going to announce their presence to the others. Even worse, he wasn't by himself. Two additional ninja were standing to either side of him, completely hidden by a henge, which gave them the appearance of big stones, but the others couldn't see them. That wasn't the worst of it all. Though no, the worst part was that the two henge-clad shinobi had the hidden clouds headbands on. Whispering, I wonder if Taicho really is watching our every move, Naruto said. Hinata answered quietly, I hope so, adding, Cloud seems to be very interested in us lately. Naruto gave a head nod. Although they couldn't take that chance at the moment, he sincerely hoped he could send Shikamaru a message right now to let him know what they knew and to let him know they were there. Shika said absently, welcome back, as Sasuke and the others touched down next to him. Wait for my signal. Here's the plan. A few seconds later, the group hurried into position. After a moment, Sasuke added, remember, we're going for the incapacitation, not the kill, but if your life is on the line, end him. After a quick gust of wind, the group launched an attack. They had the numbers and the element of surprise on their side in the event that some unexpected circumstances arose. They even had a multi-layered plan in place. However, even though Shikamaru had set up traps during Sasuke's absence and they were the most promising of their generation, not everything can be anticipated. Not everything is predictable. And once you decide to take a crucial and life-altering action, you cannot take it back. You must live with the consequences whether you like them or not. The mistake Shikamaru had made had been to attack directly. Since they were ninjas, it was expected that they would launch lethal, accurate attacks from the shadows by attacking directly. The two henge-D shinobi had ample warning and time to counterattack, as evidenced by the backhand Shoji and Kiba received when they arrived at the rocks. Before they could even comprehend that they were up against three opponents instead of just one, two of their fighters were eliminated in that instant. So they were the chakra spikes I kept seeing, yelled Sasuke as he paused and got ready to perform a Kaden jutsu. Grand Fireball. The enormous ball of fire shot straight at the two shinobi who had been exposed, but it was swiftly stopped by a wall of water, creating a steamy smokescreen. Sakura and Ino had plenty of time to jump in, grab their allies, and escape. Or so they believed, until an electric arc struck Ino in the back. Kiba was in a similar state beneath her when she collapsed to the ground, smoking and limp, but at least she was far from the enemy. It would be impossible for them to deliver the final blow without exposing themselves. Since three of the high no cage were eliminated, their numbers were now 4-3, which is regrettably fairly even. Even as Shika guided his shadow to where he knew one of the shuriken would land, Sasuke used all the savagery he could muster to hurtle the few shuriken the group had at the enemies. However, the other one appeared to know what would happen and ran forward at the genius's obvious opening, only to be swarmed with insects that tried to drain him of his chakra by biting at his flesh. Only 2 of the 7 people there realized what was about to happen when a blonde blur and a similar blue one appeared behind the man and started quickly hitting him in his tenketsu. The man was able to fry the bugs by putting lightning through his system in a matter of seconds, but it was too late. Cage main jutsu success, Shikamaru said, securing the other adversary. Now for the last one. The unidentified man began to clap. The battle had only been going on for 30 seconds or less, and it was already over. 30 seconds, he began, lifting his glasses from the corner of his nose. 30 seconds was all it took for 9 kids to overwhelm 2 Chunin bodyguards. Even for the Leaf, not bad. The group's breath caught in their throats as the intent to kill poured over them. This man was clearly of Junin caliber, if not higher, and was not a Chunin. With his hair blowing in the wind and a crescent-shaped scar on his forehead, he continued, "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ieyasu Kamigawa, but you can call me Death if you want." Then he ran. "Do you think they've realized it yet, Kakashi?" "I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. I don't understand. I know Minato told you the specifics of the plan," the Hokage retorted, "so there's no need to play coy with me." Eyes darting to the room's hidden Anbu, Kakashi retorted, "No, Hokage-sama. I don't think they've realized what is happening to their bodies. But should we be discussing something of this level of importance with others present?" he asked. "Do not worry about that," Sarutobi calmly responded. "They've earned their right to be here. No information here will be spread in any way, shape, or form." "I was informed of what Tsunade-sama did to them." "Yes," Kakashi said, bowing rapidly to demonstrate his understanding and compliance. After a little rambling, the Hokage said, "I see. Have they begun to show the effects of the storm?" "No, sir, it seems the storm isn't having any adverse effects on them," replied the captain of the Anbu. "As far as I can tell, they will only be affected by the positive impacts. Tsunade isn't hailed as the legendary medic for nothing." "Indeed, Hokage-sama, have any of them shown the positive signs of the storm's effects?" "None of our shifts have reported anything unusual except..." "Yes." The Hokage hurriedly buried. "Not long after the storm started, it was reported to me that a tree's root had forced a hole in the opening of a cave they were staying in, after being trapped by a landslide." "Excellent," the Hokage replied to the Anbu with silver hair. "I don't know if you're aware, but other than the positive effects of the storm, it also hastens the awakening of any Kekkei Genkei that the user may contain. It's just unknown how fast or to what level their bloodlines will be opened. Only time will tell how much power it can unlock, and we have much time left before the storm begins to subside." "Yes we do," replied Kakashi. "I doubt these cadets realize that they'll be on this island for a few more years." Crack Shino tried his hardest to hide the pain of that blow. Naruto was about 20 feet away, slowly rising to his feet. While Shikamaru lay unconscious behind him, the Junin was merely playing with them. "This was a slaughter, not a fight, Death," he said. "What a ruse." Ever since he entered the fight, he had been playing with their minds. Ieyasu said idly, "Just give up," gesturing with his hand in a conciliatory manner. "I might even make your death quick." Shino wanted to play with them until they were completely broken, but he was also positive that offer had been a clear lie. He had no intention of giving up. The young Aburame responded, "Thank you for the consideration, but I'm afraid I will have to decline your offer." "I didn't think someone from your clan was capable of sarcasm," he responded with an uncontrollable grin. "Look around you, all of your allies are down for the count except that weird blonde Hyuga and that pink-haired wannabe over there." He was entirely correct. After 5 minutes of fighting, only Sakura, Shino, and Naruto remained conscious. Shika had been kicked in the stomach, sending him flying about 30 feet, and Hinata had been dealt with first, taking a hard blow to the back of her head. Sasuke had been a little more cunning. He had avoided the man's first blow, but when he attempted to strike back, Ieyasu was able to send electricity through his body, knocking the Uchiha out cold. "You see this scar here?" The man raised his head. "I received this from the infamous Mirror Ninja, Kakashi of the Sharingan. I promise, if I could survive a battle with him, what makes you think you stand as more than a pebble in my path?" Shino said, "It's easy," and Naruto joined him. "You don't realize how easy it is." And there was fire all over the man. Sasuke coughed several times, spitting a globule of blood to the side after hacking it up. The Junin's shock treatment wasn't too bad, but the kick that sent him flying into a tree caused some damage. As he gazed at the outcome of his labor, he remarked, "Roast, you moron," until the man began to move once more. The man's body was covered in third-degree burns, but he continued to move while his face was scourged in anger, giving him an even more menacing appearance. "You little bastard." Sasuke didn't know what hit him. Punch after punch, each more vicious than the last, battered him until he was on the verge of blacking out, knocking him around like a rag doll. "Sasuke Uchiha would die here," the man said, lifting him by the throat. Naruto and Shino acted quickly, even as the man's hand tightened, but they were aware that it would be too late. They had nothing left that could get to the man in time, not even to slightly obstruct him, and he was too far away. Then there was blood. But Sasuke wasn't the one lying there, either dead or injured. Ieyasu was the one. He cried out, "What the hell?" despite the fact that his arms were ripped out of their sockets. Sakura was nearly unrecognizable. "Leave him alone." she exclaimed even as the vines under her control tore the man's arms from his body, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The expression on her face warned anyone who dared to challenge her of death. His legs were severed at the kneecap with another hand gesture. He was sobbing and whimpering and pleading for forgiveness. By the time Shino and Naruto arrived, that would not sit well with Sakura. However, Kakashi came to her side and put his hand on her shoulder to appease her before she could stop the man. "Remember, Sakura, one of our shinobi teachings. Always put the mission before your personal feelings. He will die, and soon, but not right now." She stammered, losing control of her chakra. "Taicho?" The plants dropped to the ground, dead. "I told you I wouldn't be here to help you, but this is something else entirely," he said. "This man was here for a reason, and we will find out what it was. You all did well." The three other contenders regarded him with disbelief. "I mean it, this is a Junin," and he wasn't kidding when he said the other two were Chunin. "You nine fared far better than any of your teachers could have expected. Even me, good job, cadets." The three continued to gaze at him. "I'm taking this man to tea and I get your allies back to your camp. You can't forget the nature of this storm." Kakashi vanished after that, and the group took the only action they could following instructions. They gathered the others to get ready for the trip to camp and woke up as many as they could. However, there was only one question that both Shino and Naruto had. Was that Sakura really there? Rock Lee was well known, particularly among his teammates, for his zeal during training. Today was an exception, though, as he was often spotted running around the village or uttering amazing thoughts about how he would push himself if he failed or pursued something he considered significant. Lee's enthusiasm stemmed from Might Guy instilling many aspects of his own training in him. However, this went beyond simply running laps and punching logs. It also involved mastering his own mind, which is why he is currently motionless and meditating on the stump of a tree he knocked down a few weeks ago after it could no longer withstand his abuse. Despite human nature, stillness was something to be regarded as a mental achievement. Lee had to wait months and months to finally become so still that he could actually feel the world changing around him. It took him even longer to realize something that no one else he had ever met had figured out. He could sense the world's chakra. Naturally, it was an accident. After hours of meditation, he had almost fallen asleep when he started to notice it. However, he felt something move a few meters away, and when he turned to look, his teammate Tenten had just emerged from the underbrush. Before it recurred a few days later, he dismissed it as a coincidence with ease. He found that, although this was much more accurate, he could sense something move before something else replaced it. Like the air shifting, he had yet to find a good application for this power, but as he learned more about it and practiced meditation to sense its presence, he discovered that it was something he would gradually become more adept at. He was sure that before he finished, he would be able to feel its presence as easily as breathing. Unbeknownst to him, however, something was shifting before his eyes as he sat there meditating. He was aware that the world's chakra was changing, but he ignored it. That is, until he felt heat on his skin. He opened his eyes and almost let out a startled cry. The air before him had become a wall of flame. It just was. There was no fuel, no catalyst, and no jutsu keeping it going. However, as soon as Lee's focus wavered, it started to wane until it was only a memory. Lee said, "Wah," to no one in particular. Although Lee's inability to use jutsu was well known, if what he did know about it was accurate, then a jutsu was unquestionably responsible for that fire. What made it, though, since he hadn't molded any chakra or made any hand signs, and if his new power was to be believed, no one was around to cast one. Lee. The boy almost broke his neck by turning his head so quickly. Tenten yelled, "Lee," as he leapt from a tree. "Please tell me you saw that impossible feat," Lee exclaimed, gesturing for her to come closer. "Tenten, my youthful companion." "I don't exactly know what you're talking about, Lee," Tenten admitted as she straightened her shirt. "But Guy-sensei has called for us. It looks like we've got a C-ranked escort mission to the land of rice. We'll be leaving in a few hours, but he wants to tell us the details before we pack." "Very well, I'll be right there." Tenten was exhausted by Lee's exuberance. It seemed as though he used the energy around him to sustain his own. The girl said, "All right, Lee, just try not to take too long." Fighting the blush that threatened to overtake him, Lee waved Tenten off. In all honesty, he was convinced that the girl had something for Neji, but he still harbored a slight crush on her. Actually, he was embarrassed around her and unsure of how to behave, which contributed to a lot of his exuberance. He started incorporating his behavior into his personality because he knew that if he behaved too differently outside of their team meetings, they would eventually start to understand his predicament. "Maybe I'll be able to tell you one day, Tenten," the boy murmured to himself. "Take a break." Kakashi looked out from the mainland toward the island. The island itself was too far away to be seen, but he could tell exactly where it was because of the odd barrier that was gradually erecting around it. Even though he was aware that this was going to occur, it was still impossible to witness. The Hokage at the time, Minato Namikaze, was aware of the barrier's return because it had also appeared some 15 years prior. However, only the Yellow Flash was aware of the specifics, not even the Sandyami. The fact that the fourth had given his life before disclosing the information to anyone didn't mean he wasn't willing to share it. Hiruzen Sarutobi had previously ordered Tsunade Senju of the Sannin to return to the village for one more task before he would allow her to retire, indefinitely if she so desired, because they only knew that the storm would last for years and that it would have both positive and negative effects on the bodies of anyone caught in it. He wasn't even sure what the renowned medic had done to the kids, but to be honest, he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Naturally, the children were put in a state of sleep stasis until Tsunade was done, so they had no memory of the incident when she was finished. The kids were led to believe that they had just fallen asleep for the whole day due to exhaustion. However, the difficult part would be the barrier. He had informed his charges that he would be monitoring them during their entire stay on the island, and even though he had placed multiple cameras throughout it, he was aware that he wouldn't be able to assist them in an emergency. No one in the known world was able to break through that barrier. All of the Yondaime's barrier experts at the time had studied it, and they all agreed that it wasn't composed of chakra but rather something else entirely, something so strong that chakra couldn't even scratch it. Thus, Kakashi of the Sharingan, the fabled mirror ninja, found himself utterly unable to assist 9 pupils during their final exam. It was humiliating as well as humbling. He began to think about his charges, and one in particular. He had misled Deer by claiming that Hashirama had an affair with Mito. In the shinobi world, truth is dangerous, and it was impossible to predict what would happen if the world found out that the Harunos were Tobirama Senju's direct descendants. At the worst, the girl would be killed, and at the very least, the council might attempt to coerce the Sandyami into rebuilding the Senju. The council would be much more reluctant to rebuild the Senju or tell the world of the girl's existence if they thought it would tarnish their village's reputation. The thought of their first Hokage being unfaithful would cast doubt on anyone's mind. No. Kakashi was positive that lying to the Anbu was the right thing to do. His village's existence and face were far more important to him than his word. He whispered to himself, "I think it's time I checked the cameras." Take a break. One of the main manifestations of the Konoha Ninja Academy's shortcomings was Shikamaru, who was significantly smarter than his contemporaries despite projecting a lazy demeanor. His father used to tease him about tactics and looking under the underneath, as many shinobi called it. When he was a little boy, his father had informed him that there were 2 kinds of ninja in the shinobi world: those who lived in the light and those who lived in the shadows. Ironically, the Nara took great pride in the latter. He knew very well that something was happening here, something they were not witnessing. Though only a few pieces had emerged thus far, he was aware that this island represented more. Shika was the first to discover that the island was covered in cameras. Although he was aware that their Taicho had probably put them there, he had thought about what their presence meant and hadn't bothered to tell the others about them. Naturally, he had taken their Taicho's promise to constantly watch them very literally, believing the man would be here with them in the shadows, but he wasn't. This raised more questions, chief among them the straightforward one: why wasn't he here in person? Though Shikamaru's thoughts were racing through the possibilities, he didn't come to the firm conclusion that something was going to happen here in which he couldn't take part until he saw the purple barrier rising from the sea. Until Kiba said, "What the hell is that?" The shadow user was unaware that the other members of the High No Cage had joined him. "I don't know, Kiba," he said, tensing up a little, "but I think I understand why Taicho said he wouldn't help us." With his Sharingan blazing as he gazed up at the forming dome, Sasuke responded, "It's because he isn't here, huh? We're stuck here on this island till this thing subsides." "Well, I don't know about the rest of you," replied Naruto, "but I think it's time I got some training. And anyone else join me?" His response was a chorus of puzzled expressions, from the amusingly pale face Ino supported to raised eyebrows. "Suit yourselves." Following his exit, Shino spoke up, "I believe Naruto's training idea is correct. We've already been here for several weeks. I don't know about the rest of you, but I think we'll be stuck in here for some time. And I for one don't plan on leaving the same man I was when I came here." He was shocked to see the majority of the others following him. As he left to join Naruto, he raised an eyebrow in the direction of the others. Kiba clenched his fist and yelled, "Don't think you're going to be doing this by yourselves. We're the High No Cage." Hinata concurred, walking up to him, "And we do everything as the family we are," she said. Saying, "We've come too far to hold ourselves back," Sasuke joined him on the other side. Sakura said, "And when we're done here," rotating in front of him. Adding, "The world won't know what hit them," Shoji said. "Take a break more than anyone else in the room," Kakashi said to himself. "Figures they're broken, how does this even happen?" They aren't broken, Kakashi. He almost broke his back while spinning around and saluting, saying, Hokage-sama, pardon me, I didn't notice your presence. It's okay, Kakashi, you can speak freely here, the elderly man laughed. I ordered these from Tanzaku town a few weeks ago, and I tested them before. Now I don't understand what's going on. Kakashi, as I said, they aren't broken, are you certain, Hokage-sama? I mean everything on them is moving in? I'm quite aware, but I promise you, this was mentioned by Minato, they aren't broken. But that could only mean, exactly, now you see why they were marked with their clan's symbol. Before he spoke, Kakashi stood silently for a few seconds. What Tsunade did to them, will they still be human? The man replied with a grave expression, what she did should obliterate any and all negative effects of the storm. Kakashi, as I said before, she studied the men from the last time very carefully. After that, Kakashi appeared to visibly relax. That being said, they were chosen for a reason. Captain, you should remember that. Take a break. I don't know what the hell it is, but something is chasing me, Kiba yelled, leaping from tree line towards his group. Everyone, fall back to the cave. A shrill cry from Ino cut Choji off as the creature that had been pursuing Kiba came out of the forest. What are you talking about? Asked Choji. If it weren't for the absence of a head, it might as well be an ape. Its entire chest appeared to change as it roared, causing the ground to tremble, and if the teeth were any indication, it appeared as though its head was actually buried into its torso. It immediately started to get closer to the group, leaping like a great ape from its feet to its fists. It's a Wendigo, Shikamaru shouted to the group, everyone run. What's a? He practically shouted back at Sasuke, it doesn't matter what it is, it eats people. A huge boulder flew past them as they were racing back to the cave, shattering multiple trees before coming to a halt after embedding itself several feet into the forest floor, alerting them to the creature's danger. Oh she! Kiba rolled to the ground as a tremendous vibration swept through the group. After a moment, the group realized they had lost the Wendigo and turned to pick him up and defend him if needed. Just as Naruto opened his mouth to speak, a roar that produced a tremendous gust of wind blew him off his feet. Naruto focused intently on the sensation that something wasn't right, and it seemed that everyone else sensed it too, as the group regained their bearings. What the hell is up with this island? Neji said, the irony, as he passed his two teammates. Lee exclaimed excitedly, it may be ironic, but at least the trip promises to be eventful. Guy had told the group before they left that they were taking a merchant named Urandi Kawa to the land of rice to deliver his shipment, which was the rice that had angered Neji. Tenten apologized, making every effort to appear stern. A bandit-controlled toll road isn't exactly my idea of a good time, Lee, she said. That may be so, Lee said, but it's not every day we get to test our skills against such unyouthful opponents. I, personally, consider it a marker showing how I've improved over the past year. Tenten grinned. Tenten readily regarded Lee as her best friend, despite his outrageous demeanor. She thought his attitude was charming despite his flaws, some of which were obvious and some of which were not. He consistently challenged himself to go farther than anyone thought he could, and he was generally successful. He was a great man at heart, even though he may have been a boy at heart, yearning for adventure and danger while saving princesses and freeing townspeople. It was not surprising when she started to feel something for him, even if it was only as a close friend, because he was always there for her when she needed him. She cautioned, surely there are better ways to do that, Lee. Neji continued, yes, Lee, adding, I'm sure there are better ways that don't embarrass yourself while you're at it. Neji was alluding to a mission that had taken place a few months earlier in which Lee had certainly embarrassed himself. He eventually lost his boredom and challenged Neji to a duel during a straightforward C-ranked mission to the land of birds. Lee was running around the town 10 minutes late, but it was too late for him to notice the mudhole for the remainder of that afternoon. He either ran away from male pigs or scrubbed himself clean in the shower, but both methods failed and he had to run away from the pigs once more. Guy looked back at his students. He had always noticed something off about Neji, and he had just realized what it was. Neji felt unworthy. When the truth was much worse, he would talk down to people and hide behind fate in an attempt to feel better than them. He was exiled for all time because he was viewed as less than human by his clan. He would continue to be a slave to his family until the day he passed away, and he would continue to serve the clan even after he passed away. Guy was aware of Neji's desire to escape his circumstances and pursue a better life, but it was up to Neji to learn the truth. He failed to see Tenten's crush as what it was, and Lee's rivalry as an indication of genuine friendship. Instead, he saw Lee's rivalry as someone striving to be more than what he was, a failure, and Tenten's crush as a desire to be more than just another ninja in order for Neji to be fully free. Guy could only hope that he would one day open up and accept the love of people around him. Yurandi casually said to Guy, "We are still a few days out of my next destination," carrying on their earlier discussion. "But if you would like to stop for the night, I would not be opposed." Despite his smooth delivery, Guy sensed a hint of unease in the man's voice, as if he didn't want to reach their destination. He was sure the man wouldn't be so concerned if it were just bandits. The alarms were blaring now, and Guy had long since learned to trust his instincts, so something about this mission felt off. After a moment, Guy said, "So you said this banded toll road was along the Takimaru path leading into Rice Country," without really acknowledging Yurandi's earlier remark. "Why not simply take another route again?" Guy asked. "I'm headed to Rimu City," replied the dead ahead. "Taking any other path into the country would add days to my journey, which is why I hired your team. It is more profitable to simply hire you ninja to escort me through than to spend the extra few days it would take me to follow a different path." Guy narrowed his eyes at the unwary man and thought, that sounded rehearsed. This could be a trap. Tenten joined in, asking, "So why is it you hired our team, specifically?" "The young man over there, actually," Yurandi responded, almost uncertainly nodding toward Neji. "I've heard about the Byakugan. It allows the user to see every direction and even see through objects, seeing as the road is roughly 40 miles long and the bandits have been known to set up their toll within a 20-mile stretch of it. I felt the boy's bloodline would be the most useful tool to carry along the way." The others had now realized as well. There was a hint of uncertainty in the man's voice. Despite his cool demeanor and fluid speech pattern, it sounded practiced until he began discussing Neji, at which point he told Guy the real reason for the mission. Even though this man was a merchant, he didn't think that simple bandits were operating this toll road, and the toll payment seemed dubious. Neji Hyuga was their target. Lying on this futon, Neji gazed up at the ceiling. Despite Guy-sensei's attempts to warn them, he could tell they were entering a trap. He could tell even if he didn't display any of the subtle indicators of dishonesty that men typically do just by looking at how attentive he was to the mission. In general, the man was, to put it mildly, gregarious, even going so far as to shout about youth to the world. But ever since learning that Neji's Byakugan was the primary factor in their team's hiring, Guy had been a little quiet and absurdly focused on the task at hand. After lying there for almost an hour, he heard Lee get up next to him, and then the boy turned to look at him. Lee remarked, "I see you can't sleep either." Neji chose to look at his teammate and then back at the ceiling without answering. "Whatever is waiting for us down this road, we'll all walk it together," the child continued, his gaze matching Neji's. "Remember that we have your back. Neji, we're a team. Don't try to ostracize yourself from us. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Neji turned to lie on his side, facing the wall. Without bothering to respond a few minutes later, he turned to lie on Lee's back once more after hearing his snores. In fact, he was deeply troubled by Lee's declaration. Although he still didn't think Lee was a worthy opponent and didn't particularly like the boy's character, there was something about him that gave him hope that his destiny wasn't predetermined. Neji attempted to suppress the emotion but was unable to do so. With a soft smile, he thought to himself, "Freedom, perhaps it's not so far away after all." Neji closed his eyes and fell asleep after a short while. 2753 thunk, 2754 thunk. Just watching Lee train was wearing Tenten out unexpectedly light for the young man. He had completed 2,000 push-ups, 5,000 jumping jacks, and 10 village laps. Thus far Lee had been exercising vigorously, but it was still insignificant in comparison to what he had typically done by this hour. Following a brief argument, Lee complied with Guy's order to ease up on his training for the mission, dumbing down his workout by at least 60%. When his final kick shattered through the tree he was using and it fell to the forest floor a good distance behind the group, Lee made the decision to stop working out. "Will neither of you two be joining me this morning?" Tenten simply grinned awkwardly and scratched the back of her head, saying, "Sorry Lee, I'm taking this mission as a bit of a breather on training. Besides, if we do run into trouble, I'd like to know that I have all of my weapons on hand. Don't want to chance losing any in training." Neji gave Lee a quick glance before he resumed his meditation. "Right," Lee replied almost sarcastically, "like you would actually lose any of them. I can't even remember the last time you missed a target, much less lost a weapon you threw." With a smile on her face, Tenten said, "True enough, but honestly, I'd rather spend this time thinking of a plan of action for when things actually do go south, and you know they will." She then turned her eyes to the ground. Lee raised his eyebrows. Ever since Tour Charge made mention of Neji's Byakugan, he's been a bit more reserved. It's almost a guarantee that this is actually a hit. "My concern isn't the thought of losing my eyes," he said quietly. "When I die, my bloodline will be sealed with me. If it comes down to it, I will end my own life to protect the secrets of my clan. My concern has less to do with the what and why, and more to do with the who." Lee considered it for a moment. "I agree, My young students, Guy said, landing next to Neji, there are any number of potential clients for the eyes of a Hyuga, but I'm beginning to doubt that this is a bandit-controlled road. But why would you think that it wasn't, Guy-sensei? Lee asked. Lee's mouth formed a "oh" as Guy's expression became solemn and then pointed at himself. Bandits don't stand a chance against ninja, and few less a chance against an experienced Junin like me. I don't mean to sound cocky, but I'm the eternal rival of Sharingan Kakashi. There's no minor bandit in the world that could stand a chance against me. The only other option, he said, lightly waving his hand, is that they either have a ninja or so under their employ, or, Neji concluded, or they are all ninja, for him. The man gave a serious nod. Neji casually remarked, I think I'm going to go for a walk, and please, don't follow me, I can handle myself. Guy cut Lee off just as he appeared to object, saying, very well, but please do not wander too far from the village. We'll be planning a strategy right before nightfall, so I expect you to return before then. Neji said, very well, and walked away. Even though the others couldn't see it, Neji smiled. He might be able to avoid his fate after all. Guy was surprised to find that the rest of the trip was trouble-free. About 20 miles down the Takimaru path, they had encountered the bandits and dealt with them head-on. After they arrived in Rimu and said goodbye to the merchant, Guy thought he saw Urandi's face flash an evil smirk before it was replaced by the businessman's unimpressed expression. Guy felt very uneasy about the entire mission, but shortly after Neji had returned to talk strategy, Urandi appeared much more relaxed than he had been. He merely replied that he was feeling much better than he had in a long time and that the town had a red light district. When asked why, the eccentric man believed that his mission was not yet complete, and he was determined to fill in the Hokage. When they returned later that night, any and all anomalies needed to be examined, and then examined again, given the mounting tension with Kumo. Splash Naruto swam under the water once more, surfaced, and jumped out, landing on his feet in a furious dash. The group had made the decision to resume training a few weeks earlier. The rain was not going to stop anytime soon, and they had rapidly learned to jump whenever a lightning bolt hit the water, but they were getting by. Shino had suggested that they keep training, arguing that it was justified by pointing out how long they had been on the island and how much stronger they could have been by now. Obviously, Sasuke and Naruto were thrilled about the chance to train hard, but Ino and Shikamaru weren't so thrilled. But in the end, they all complied and were significantly improving. In fact, Kiba proposed expanding their routine to include running up the side of a cliff face that had largely turned to mud in recent months. Since first meeting the Wendigo, the group had encountered a number of monstrosities, but none had been quite as humanoid, and none had heard from the creature since. Actually, Naruto wouldn't mind seeing it again because he was sure he could defeat it, but his logic wasn't quite that clear-cut. What caused that shockwave wasn't a real treat, and if he ran across it again, it's still alive. However, if they didn't run across the Wendigo, they would eventually come across the thing that killed it. Naruto wasn't certain he was prepared for such a thing. Observing Naruto's lack of focus, Kiba yelled, eyes on the prize, Blondie. You keep zoning out like that and one of those freaky Manicampath will get you. Naruto chuckled at the expense of his pals. Kiba only learned about the ancient fish because, like Naruto right now, he was dozing off when one of them leapt out of the water and ate him whole. Only Ino's quick thinking, which took control of the fish's mind and made it upchuck her comrade, saved him. Kiba didn't run over the ocean for a week after the incident because he was so traumatized. At Kiba's grimace, Naruto exclaimed, don't worry about me, fish food. I think they have a taste for dog now. Let's see how funny you think it is when you have to grow gills. Kiba grabbed his head underwater before he knew it. With a quick thought, Naruto tapped Kiba's foot, cutting off his chakra flow and keeping him upright. Naruto laughed as he leapt out of the water and ran away from Kiba after giving it one final glub. Sighing and shaking her head, Ino said, boys, at least it's entertaining. Running to Kiba's location, Hinata lifted him to the water's surface, striking his foot so he could follow the blonde. Hinata grinned to herself because, if she really considered it, the boys were just as bad as their brothers, which was the whole point of this training. As he had been doing for the past week or so, Kakashi pounded his hand on the monitor in front of him once more. He couldn't help it, even though the Hokage had warned him it wouldn't help at all. It was also a stress reliever, and he was under a lot of stress. Kakashi had been the Anbu protecting the Hokage the night before, and Guy had just returned from his mission. The fact that the remainder of the mission had gone smoothly disturbed him because he was positive that Kumo was pursuing Neji. They would benefit from a loose Byakugan, even one that was marked on, and their previous attempts to acquire one had nearly succeeded. Thus, it didn't make sense to Kakashi that they would simply let Neji leave without even making an effort. Kakashi paused to reflect. Neji was separated from the rest of the squad for a while, so maybe they did try to get it from the boy. However, That was not very logical. Although the boy was a prodigy, he was not a Junin, and he was sure Kumo would do whatever it took to get his eyes. Too much was unknown to Kakashi, and things were becoming more complicated. The Hokage had to hear his report. Sakura was inconsolable. She couldn't stop his yelling, even though everything she was doing was correct based on any human anatomy books she had read. Although there was no visible physical harm, Kiba must have been in terrible pain if the guttural screams coming from his mouth were any indication. Sakura muttered, "I can't do anything for him," her voice expressing her sorrow. Wondering what she could do for her friend, Hinata continued, "I've even tried using Nernroot to knock him out. Nothing's working on him at all. None of the herbs I could find seem to be doing any good either." Shika was about to respond when Kiba's cries stopped and his eyes widened in blankness. "Is he? No, he's just passed out," Hinata said, feeling his pulse. "I don't understand why his eyes are open though." "It doesn't matter," Shika said. "We need to make sure we have plenty of water for him when he wakes up. If the screams are any indication, he'd die of dehydration long before this thing kills him." Naruto was thinking about his Inuzuka companion while he raked a stick through the mud outside the cavern. Despite the fact that they were usually at each other's throats and that he occasionally threw barbs at him, he still had a deep affection for the boy. It was very upsetting to him that he was in this much pain and that there was nothing he could do about it. If only there was something he could do. He wasn't very helpful here because he wasn't proficient in any medical ninjutsu and didn't know much about medicinal herbs. Being there for him when he woke up was the only thing he could do. Kiba started to stir as night fell, drawing the girls' attention. As they prepared to summon Naruto and the others, they noticed something frightful. Kiba's eye turned white, and his body crunched. Naruto and the others only had to dash into the cave to see what they could do when they heard his screams echoing throughout it once more. But as the creature Sakura was holding down with vines started to tear through them, they were met with a sight they would never soon forget: seeing a patch of fur on the beast's right shoulder that had turned white rather than brown and had the same shape as Kiba's tattoo made the already horrifying scene even worse. Screaming, "I think we have a problem here, guys." Sasuke tried to hurry the others to the cave. Shika and the others arrived just as the beast flexed. Shredding the vines, it gazed up at the top of the cavern where they were and fixed its gaze on a hole that had been illuminated by the full moon as it threw its head back and displayed its claws. It was undoubtedly the most terrifying thing any of them had ever seen. Naruto had never heard a howl so terrifying. Shikamaru gazed down at his unconscious comrade's form, which was now completely human but naked. He was still trying to make sense of what was happening. Even though his mind was trying to shatter over Kiba's metamorphosis, he discovered what was likely the most unusual feature of the night when he noticed the light shining off Kiba's unconscious body. Moonlight. Although it was pouring down in torrents, there was moonlight. He said, "Well, that's new," as he looked up at the night sky, which was cloudless but still raging. "Out of everything you've seen here, you think a cloudless downpour is the most interesting thing to happen?" Sakura was deadpanned. With a grunt, Shika returned his focus to Kiba and said, "We need to get him back inside." Take a break. As she gazed down at Kiba's writhing form, Ino couldn't help but feel a little bit of the defenseless schoolgirl return to her. Ino had come to her own quite a few months earlier. Being marooned on an enigmatic island with strange creatures would do that to a person. None of them knew what to do next, but the others had subdued him without suffering any casualties, and it seemed that he had returned to his human form after going unconscious. His skin was burning and he was thrashing in his sleep. But they couldn't do much about it. Ino decided to take care of him herself, changing a cloth on his head every 20 minutes or so with a fresh, cooler one. One thing became very clear to her as she looked toward the cave's entrance. The rain was subsiding. She found her way outside faster than she thought she could, where she met the others who appeared to be gazing up at the sky. When the rain finally stopped, Kakashi Taicho would go back to the island and resume their training. She looked up at the moon and saw what her fellows were staring at, and realized that they were one step closer to being sent back to their families. "Shika," Ino said, her voice trembling uncontrollably, "why are there 3 moons?" Stunned, Shikamaru said, "This is impossible." In actuality, Shikamaru was struggling to understand the current situation. Despite his extraordinary intelligence, he could easily adjust to new circumstances in a crazy short period of time. But this? He was terrified because he was not entirely sure about this. Sasuke rubbed his aching shoulder and said, "Apparently it is very possible." Kiba had taken a few good licks before being beaten. Her life was altered as Ino watched the subsequent conversation while she was absorbed in her own thoughts and gazing at the moons. You would think they had never had to change before. Who said that? Ino asked hastily as she looked around her. She hadn't heard another voice in her head since training with her father prior to this damn training. Instead of hearing or seeing the voice, Ino could sense its surprise. "I don't know who you are or where you learned our clan's techniques, but I assure you, You don't want to get involved with this, you wouldn't survive it. Child, I would advise you not to threaten me, but even though your gusto is funny, you are 100,000 years too young. The voice, which was merely stating a fact and not speaking with haughtiness or bravado, caused Ino to fall silent. Girl, I'll let you deal with your mutations, but if it gets to be too much, call me out. The only person here who can is you. Changes? What was the subject of this voice? Could this be what it was referring to? Ino looked back at Kiba. Were they all going to experience this? Guys, we need to talk, she said to the group. What I have to say is important. Guys, I think I have an idea of what's going on here. Take a break. Report. Hokage-sama, said Kakashi. I'm not too certain what to report. Neji Hyuga hasn't done a single thing out of his normal routine, but I believe that in itself is unusual. It's as if he's trying to hide something. The only thing different about him is his personality. He seems more forthcoming. After reading Team Guy's previous mission request 10 times, the Hokage licked his lips and smoked his pipe once more. He couldn't seem to find anything wrong in spite of everything, but his gut told him otherwise. Furthermore, a shinobi survives into his 60s without realizing that his intuition is even more significant than his visual perception. Something's definitely not right. Kakashi, I want you to assign an Anbu squad to tail him indefinitely. Find out what is going on inside that head of his. Why not simply assign Inoichi to probe his mind? Kakashi-kun, it isn't quite that simple. I could do that, yes, but there is no guarantee that the boy is up to anything as Hokage. If I were to assign Inoichi to do this simply because I'm suspicious, it would instill dissent into my shinobi. That is something that I cannot have. I see, forgive me, Lord Hokage. Kakashi, it's not really a problem. I do have one more task for you. However, what is it? Hokage-sama, I need you to assemble a group of your most trusted Anbu assassins. Of course, Hokage-sama. Might I inquire the target? Staring into his subordinate's visible eyes, the older man's face hardened as he said, there to assassinate the Raikage. Take a break. What? What's happening? After surveying her surroundings, Ino looked inward, transparent. But only when I'm mind-walking does that happen. There was a sight like no other beneath her. If the huge castle in the distance was any indication, the city she was floating over looked like a kingdom, and everyone seemed to be grinning. She could see kids playing and laughing in a nearby field while snow was falling everywhere. Is there going to be a festival soon? And whoa, what are they? What? When Ino started to descend, she realized that the lamps she saw everywhere weren't actually lamps. Floating balls of light sat about 9 or 10 feet above pedestals that appeared to be arranged at random. Panic was beginning to set in under such an unfamiliar scene when she swiftly turned her head to see the people wandering around. Both men and women wore odd clothing. Some wore tunics and boots, while others appeared to be wearing cloaks with odd hats. They also walked with odd staves that were adorned with gemstones of various colors. When she heard kids playing, she turned her head to the left and saw that some of them were experimenting with a floating water ball, changing its shape as they tossed it to the next one. A young couple was seen dancing to a made-up song while hovering 4 or 5 feet above the kids. By this time, Ino was hyperventilating. This is wrong. This is impossible. Am I having a dream of some sort? Wah? The voice said, silence, you've tread where you don't belong. I don't get it, what's happening? I said be quiet. For someone so keen on information, you seem less than keen on hearing me out. Ino remained silent for the first time in a long time. You're in my memories from a very long time ago, but you're in danger here. You need to go. However, these things aren't feasible. This kind of stuff isn't real. I assure you, it most certainly is real, or was. Was? What are you saying? Nothing. You need to leave? Ino woke up with her back slamming against the cave wall after feeling as though she had been tackled. As if Kiba had finally woken up, he asked, you okay? You've been breathing roughly for the past few minutes. It's funny that even as she said those words, she didn't seem to believe them. Yeah, I think I'm fine. You're a terrible liar, the child replied in a raspy voice, but you don't have to tell me. I know exactly how it feels to be dealing with something you have absolutely no control over. Let me know if there's anything I can do, will ya? Ino grinned appreciatively. At least some positive things appeared to be coming from this location. Ino shifted to her side and felt a yearning as she saw Naruto and Hinata leaning against one another. Regardless of whether it was love or attraction, the two had a special bond that they were unaware of. Before this training, Ino had a slight crush on Sasuke, but as she matured, she realized it wasn't really what she had assumed. Sure, Sasuke was fine, but what really drew her to him was the air of mystery he exuded before she was alone here, and ever since then, she had a slight yearning. Although she had the others, they weren't really brothers and sisters in this situation, as Kakashi Taicho had noted. But when she looked at the others, she saw something that eased her problems. They were all in the same situation. United by a common destiny, Ino grinned as she slowly fell asleep. I guess they're my new family after all. Take a break. When the group was awakened in the morning by a high-pitched, shrill roar, Shikamaru used only a few hand signals to send Naruto, Sasuke, and the recently recovered Kiba off in the direction it had come from. Is that a dragon? Kiba practically cried out from the foliage, staring at the bestial creature with wide eyes. From the opposite side of it, Sasuke said, I don't think so, looks more like a wyvern, which caused the creature to look in different directions and back again. Naruto added, yeah, behind it, making it turn around. You see how it has only 2 legs and its arms are merged with its wings. That's a surefire way to tell 2 apart. As it scuttled toward Naruto, the creature roared in its shrill voice once more and clicked its wings together above its head, producing an oddly high-pitched sound. Kiba flexed his fingers and said, so what action should we take? As the 3 of them gathered again in the treetops. Sasuke grinned and made the tiger hand gesture, saying, I'm willing to try it out. Ever had fried wyvern? Take a break. What is that? Shoji shouted and hurried over to assist the others in their catch. Roasted wyvern, dinner. Naruto smiled in response, a delicacy our village has never seen before. After gathering for their meal, the group began eating the worst-tasting meat they had ever encountered. So much for delicacy, Shika said, gasping for air, but at least it's something. That was the only idea that was accepted. They're coming. Run and hide in your cave. Ino was wide-eyed because she had not heard that voice in days and had assumed it was her imagination. You've killed something at once, so don't just sit there eating that brush meat, go hide. Dude. We must leave this place. The blonde almost let out a terrified scream. Kiba was the first to stand up as the group turned to face their comrade, saying, if she says we have to go, then we should go. Why would we do that? Sasuke started. The Inuzuka retorted, it doesn't matter why, adding, we must leave because she clearly knows something is amiss. I think she's real. Sasuke grinned, but before he could speak, the ground shook and Kiba fell to his back due to the strong earthquake. As everyone tried to straighten themselves, a terrible truth became apparent. The enormous beast pushed its way through the tree line with a deafening roar that sounded like a cataclysm in and of itself. That, Kiba, said Naruto in a high-stressed, nervous voice, that is a fucking dragon. Death. They were looking into death's eyes. They had no chance of surviving this encounter. The dragon threw back its head and sprayed a stream of blazing fire. Even as the flames spread out over them, Ino cried to herself, we're going to die. No, you're not. A man-shaped form materialized in front of the group in a flash of golden light. The group could only see his black silhouette, which stood out against the dazzling flames. As the man turned around, they learned of another trait. His golden eyes seemed to glow off his form. The high-no cage sprang to their feet and took off like a flash. Run to the caves. Remember, kids, the dragons are coming. Their master, Restal, the demon, is calling them, and he would see the world burn. As they hurried to safety, the 9 high-no cage members heard these words repeated in their minds, and the voice changed to a man's. Beware the destroyer of worlds, take a break. Even though the dragons hadn't arrived yet, the group was still able to avoid having to travel far from their hovel during the month that had passed since the man who had saved them sent them the ominous message. Shika thought that if something as strong as a dragon could grow in a world like this, then they obviously had to have some sort of strong competition. Otherwise they would have simply exhausted the food chain. They had seen more Wendigo and wyverns, but they were of the weaker variety of monsters, and more of the strange monsters had started to appear. Another month passed before the group found one of the beasts that most likely fell in the middle of that chain. Hinata had been gathering fruits and other items when she noticed something running just inside her Byakugan's field of vision. When she looked closely, it looked like one of the Wendigo they had encountered a few hours earlier, but as she was about to ignore it, something swooped in and literally tore it in half. The beast appeared to be composed of sticks and leaves, resembling a human-like body with wings and claws. What was worse was that it didn't actually consume the Wendigo. Instead, it ripped into its already disfigured body and let it perish there. Take a break. How about we eat these Wendigo once more? I mean, there are more than a few of them, obviously, and it beats eating berries all the time, Shoji said, as Hinata repeated what she had observed. Do you recall the first few Wendigo that we saw all those months ago, Shoji? I was wondering why we hadn't come across and more of them until recently when the skies cleared, and I think I finally know what happened, Shika added after receiving a nod from Shoji. To hear their elected leader, the group had assembled. We're not in High no Kuni anymore. In my opinion, on this island, all these creatures, I believe that we are in the midst of 2 different lives that are blending together in some way. I don't know why we haven't been impacted, or why Kiba has been impacted so badly, but I believe those Wendigo we first fought against they were, I believe, remnants of the ninja that we initially met here. Choji's face went white. He had inadvertently implied that they engaged in cannibalism. Shika comforted Choji, saying, "Don't dwell on it too much, you couldn't have known." Another presence became apparent as the group stopped to consider the ideas. "That's a very astute observation, boy." The group drew their weapons and turned to face the voice. "Take those out, they won't affect me in any way." For the first time, Ino was able to identify the voice in her mind, and what a face it was. Long, light blue hair and an odd chest armor, all wrapped in a dark blue cloak, but what really captured her attention were his blazing golden eyes. "Who are you?" Sasuke moved to the front and demanded as he approached him slowly. The air around him seemed to be alive and roaring with enough electricity to make Sasuke's hair stand on end. "I'm afraid I can't tell you my name," he said, "but you may call me Traveler."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.